Life was already a tragedy. Joey was poor and a virgin, earning such a terrible salary that even begging felt like a bonus. The only thing he carried besides debts was a big chunk of monster on his back. But hold on, it could get worse, and it did. Wow, how it got worse. After being betrayed, shot, and nearly served for lunch, I was going to wake up, and bingo, he was all weird with extra legs and a pair of antennae. Yes, he turned into a cockroach. To make matters worse, the god of cockroaches found him disrespectful and promptly cut off his system. And the bottom of the pit turned into a banquet now, powerless, hopeless, surrounded by cockroaches that considered poop a fine delicacy. Then he had to decide, accept the new life or try to do something about it. This is the first Joe that falls, proving that yes, you can reincarnate into something much worse than slime. Joey was there, sweating bullets, dragging a chunk of bug carcass on his back. It was tremendously heavy. Everyone back there was in the same boat, carrying pieces of monster everywhere. The sun was almost setting, leaving everything a bit reddish. In the middle of the street, a giant monster, huge, with scary teeth and bizarre insect eyes. Yikes. Up above, a guy was shouting and screaming for no one to stop, or everyone would go to bed with empty stomachs. What a freeloader, man. Everyone was already grinding the carcasses, about to drop from exhaustion. It was heavy work, you know? One guy up there, in true modern slavery style, wouldn't let anyone even breathe. "Drag that until you fall hard," he yelled. One of the guys, nearly out of strength, tried to get up, apologizing. "Poor guy, man," I cried. He was all bent over, almost kissing the ground from the weight. You could see his struggle not to collapse, but he couldn't hold on anymore and screamed from the bottom of his throat. It was heart-wrenching from so much suffering. A muscular guy came, showing off, cursing Joey as useless, and telling him to stop stalling. What an annoying guy, biting his lips. He held on and kept working. In his gaze, you could see the strength of will and the sadness mixed together. Total bad vibe. His name was Joey. He was just another nobody trying to survive in that hell. In the year 2026, the city looked peaceful from afar. Tall buildings, blue sky. It almost seemed like a normal life, but suddenly, the calm was blown to bits. The city was attacked by bizarre monsters that no one knew where they came from. Giant worms, other tremendously strange creatures, all destroying and causing major chaos. We had to face a bunch of monsters, and the land turned into some kind of giant dance of horror, and they called all this mess and chaos the Abyss. Maybe a fitting name, right? That dance released a kind of wildly crazy radiation that gave superpowers to some people. Those are the awakened, and those who gained these powers became the toughest guys around. Since he wasn't that lucky, he became a slave to survive. What an injustice. There goes Joey, and the others dragging a piece of a giant. And the guy passing stuff left and right only shouted, indicating where to put all that junk. Everyone was almost out of breath, carrying the monster's carcass into a truck. It was the last straw again, some yelling to push. It felt like they were whipping everyone there. All that was missing was the whip. Joey and another person fell to their knees, breathless, in front of the truck. What exhaustion. Before he could catch his breath, a guy with a really serious face slapped Joey, extremely aggressive. The guy started yelling, accusing Joey of playing the victim. Joey bowed his head, held his face, saying nothing. Then he raised his head with a little smile on his face. "What audacity, my brother!" And he asked the guy if his arm wasn't hurting from all the hitting. The guy glared and told him to get back to work, or he'd be out of there. Joey had now arranged his teeth and agreed right away. He didn't have much choice, did he? The guy insisted on delivering the carcasses before nightfall, otherwise no one would eat. A legitimate blackmail, to work that hard on an empty stomach. But Joey just said he would handle the job. Suddenly, a huge chunk of carcass began to tremble and everyone started to panic. Joey, with a face that said he had seen it all, looked at the shaking ground and thought it might be an earthquake. Out of nowhere, a giant monster with a massive mouth erupted from the ground, ready to swallow him whole. Joey's eyes widened in terror. It was the end of the line. The guy, witnessing the scene, was stunned to realize that one of the monsters was still alive. Everyone began to run, screaming in fear as the beast attacked. Joey ran as fast as he could, but the guy, not wanting to let him escape, followed. Suddenly, the guy pulled out a gun and fired an extremely powerful shot, a huge bang. Joey was shot in the leg and flew forward, blood gushing out. Poor guy. Now panting, with a pained expression, and his bone horrendously deformed, terrified he was going to die, he turned his head to see who was talking. The guy pointed the gun at him with a psychopathic, wicked smile, savoring the moment to send him to the grave. Joey fell to the ground with his leg bleeding. The guy began to laugh, enjoying the entire situation, and disdainfully remarked that people like Joey deserved to die. He was just going to the grave. Joey, lying on the ground, realized that this guy had used him as bait for everyone else to escape. He couldn't believe it, thinking, why was it so hard to survive? He began to think that a weak and talentless guy in the world would be discarded sooner or later, but he preferred it to be later, right? His eyes filled with tears, poor thing, and he saw a cockroach crawling nearby. He even felt envious of the cockroach and bitterly realized, Even insects adapted better than he did in that world. At the last moment, a monster with a giant mouth appeared in front of him, and he thought that in the next life, he didn't want to be born so weak. In the final instant before dying, he thought that if he turned into a cockroach, his life would be much easier. Suddenly, an unknown body modification system appeared, but the first attempts at reconstruction failed. After 1,000,000 attempts, the system finally announced that the reconstruction was successful. Phew! A strange noise in the dark alley created a sinister atmosphere. Joel woke up all confused, wondering if he had died. He tried to lift his arm, but he realized with horror that his limbs were no longer human. Wow! He saw a mirror and went to look at himself. His wish had come true. A cockroach appeared in the reflection. He widened his eyes, shocked, and slowly began to understand what had happened. To your delight, my dear friends, he had turned into a cockroach. His own reflection frightened him. He started to panic, screaming, unable to believe what was going on. He yelled, "Mom, I've really turned into a cockroach. Oh my God, how unfortunate." A guy was tremendously surprised to see that he had an extra pair of arms, but moving them didn't bother him. On the contrary, it was as if he had had those arms his whole life. He realized that the only thing that bothered him was the new muscles in his back, which he still wasn't quite used to. Before he could understand everything, in that falling situation, he tried to hold on, but saw that the wings moved if he controlled the muscles in his back, even though he still didn't know how to control that. Tremendously irritated, he began to scream that if he had known his last wish would come true, he would have asked for something else. Maybe he could have turned into the Hulk, right? And suddenly, a shining assistant appeared in front of him, calling him a clueless human, and rebuking him for mocking the feelings of the gods, the cockroach. The creature continued to say that in the last 5,000 years, he was the first person to ask for strength from the god cockroach, but now he was disappointed with his attitude. Joel realized immediately and was surprised to see that the comics didn't lie. He was now in an Ezekiel moment, all emotional, completely changed his posture and called that shining creature his brother of the system, and even father, apologizing for his words. But the god cockroach didn't care about the pleas and disappeared, leaving the hero alone with a new body. A message appeared on the system screen. System temporarily offline. You are hated by the god cockroach. The guy was in total shock. He had really messed up with the god cockroach, and now he was without a system. What a mess. He got the system and lost it quickly. Several days went by trying to access his system, but nothing. He shouted system, but nobody answered. Despite several attempts, the system showed no signs of life. He began to realize that the situation was getting worse, until he noticed that he now understood the language of cockroaches. He started to hear other cockroaches whispering. Not knowing what to do with himself, one night he pondered his new life. Even wanting to turn into a cockroach, he couldn't shake off the feeling that it was disgusting. Soon, he saw other cockroaches gathering and eating something that looked really tasty. He looked in disgust and realized it was his own poop. Wow. One of the cockroaches cheerfully said that the poop had to be consumed warm and invited him to join the shit banquet. He was tremendously terrified and sickened and shouted for them to stay away from him, that he didn't want to participate in that at all. But the cockroach didn't give up. She picked up a piece of poop and handed it to him, but Joel threw it away in panic and repeated again that he didn't want any part of it. The cockroach tried to justify herself to her cockroach friends, but he replied that he had been shot in the heart. The guy didn't care about those excuses. He started shouting that another cockroach had a stinky breath, telling her to shut up and say nothing more. Slowly, he began to realize that human genes had made him stronger, but at the same time, he was scared of the new tastes. He started to like the smell of filth and realized that if he didn't eat normal food, one day he would wake up with his face buried in a pile of trash, looking at the dump, a heap of garbage bags. He remembered that the thick black plastic bags hindered the receptors of cockroaches, but the human mind insisted that there had to be something edible in there. He then began to search for food and found a sealed package of egg yolk pie. In fact, that thing had expired 3 years ago, yet he thought he had hit the jackpot. A system informed him that the pie had 385 calories and was still edible, but the first instinct that survived was the human one. Sheer horror. Yuck, how disgusting. 6 years expired. How could he eat that? But hunger was greater than any disgust. Despite its disgusting appearance, the pie had a pretty good smell. A rotten smell. Precisely what cockroaches love. Joel decided it was a delicacy for cockroaches. While eating the spoiled food, he felt tremendously happy with that transformation. 10 days later, he was sitting with another cockroach, thinking of his beautiful new life, where cockroaches never appeared again. He realized that the dream had been a mistake. Life wasn't as easy as he thought, and it wasn't meant for a human. Joel even thought about putting an end to it, but no matter what he did, he couldn't. After all, everyone knows that poison, water, and falls do nothing to him. Cockroaches are extremely resilient, so he decided to keep searching. He is a natural enemy of cockroaches to eat, but he remembered the giant monster that had eaten him and was too afraid to even think about it. He decided to stay alive no matter what. Cockroaches are social insects. If he could command a colony and become the king of cockroaches, his chances of survival would greatly increase. Just imagine the guy becoming the king of cockroaches and not caring anymore about having lost his connection with the cockroach gods, because with the knowledge of his past, human life, he would be able to live happily. Without a doubt, he started by praising the neighbor, saying that he had a really nice one, and even said he wanted to be friends with him, but the fat one immediately rejected friendship with that guy. That little cockroach didn't like to eat poop, and poop was really tasty, so they couldn't be friends. At that moment, the guy realized, no matter how good life was for him now, his goal was to rule the cockroaches. Extremely ambitious, right? Those insects saw Nee living it up without worrying about anything. So he decided to show that he also had power, and that's how he completed 20 days of his new rebirth as the fearless cockroach, commanding the entire colony of cockroaches. Then, the chance really appeared. The older cockroaches called everyone for a meeting, saying they were going to move to another area where there was plenty of food. Those older adult cockroaches let everyone choose, either stay there and become food for enemies, or go with them and be under their protection. The fat cockroach heard that and said she couldn't stand eating shit anymore. But hadn't she just said that poop was delicious? Joel heard the rant and thought the fat cockroach was the worst he had ever seen. Trained because she didn't even rummage through the trash for food, just waiting for the next batch of poop. A tremendous lazy one, huh? The fat one was crying, terrified of leaving. That really irritated Joe. He thought, cockroaches were homebodies because they got scared of new places, huh? Anyway, those adult cockroaches needed a volunteer to explore the way, but no one spoke up. A total silence. Joey then decided to help everyone. After all, he wasn't eating their crap anyway. And to his surprise, the cockroach god appeared again to make contact, saying that if Joey took on the mission, a cockroach god was going to consider forgiving him. Right then, Joey raised his hand determinedly and said he would lead everyone. Tremendously brave, or perhaps expected. For sure, the fat cockroach was impressed with Joey, calling him very manly, muscular, and Joey was super happy because his cheat code had come back, his little system. Soon, Joey and the fatties were in the new place. Joey now understood that this mission was, in fact, to cross the fence. It was all tremendously calm, so it was easy for Joey to pass through. But the fat cockroach said he didn't know anything. He then discovered that when the food ran out in the area, the adult cockroaches sent the youngsters to find and explore a new area. The thing is, the world was full of natural enemies, so the survival chance of the reconnaissance squad was almost zero. They could become food for some enemy at any moment, while the adult cockroaches stayed comfortably. He got scared because that was a legitimate collective suicide. He even thought the cockroach god had done that on purpose to get revenge when he died. Then the guy said they had to bail out of there because he would find a way to feed everyone. Afterward, the fat cockroach started crying again. The guy was always crying, and suddenly, that adult cockroach appeared behind Joey. He didn't understand where they wanted to go because there were a bunch of dead monsters to eat behind the fence. Whoever got there first was going to serve themselves a beautiful feast. Joey, tremendously shocked, wondered if the cockroaches had evolved so much that now they ate alien monsters. It was a miracle for the guy because he was never going to starve. Finally, he said he had to figure something out and didn't want to go on a diet, so they could do without him and start eating. The adult cockroach grabbed its knee like it was a little insect. Apparently, he was being kidnapped. Oh yes, the adult cockroach said that if he didn't explore the path, he would become cockroach dinner. I felt nauseous, grinding my teeth, thinking that even after being reborn, there was no escaping the law of the jungle. There was always someone shouting and telling him to do something. And he remembered his previous life. After all, those there were weak and unsupported and were sent to find food for the strong. They were just idiots wanting to die. The commander thought that going out to look for food was a reward on the path of survival. The adult cockroach said the same thing, saying they should be grateful because he was giving them a chance to survive, and threw Joey onto the ground. Soon, the adult cockroach landed on Joey's face as he started to be attacked by the cockroach, but he realized he had to use a little system. Otherwise, he would just turn into a cockroach and eat everything. It wasn't enough to survive the apocalypse. Joel decided he would get stronger, and soon a group of little cockroaches started to explore. Joel told his cockroach siblings to keep an eye out and move forward. If any enemies showed up, they were to warn immediately. He didn't like the fat ones being so close, but understood, even cockroaches get scared. The boy advanced and thought the fence looked tremendously odd. There was no river there, so why were there stones against the waves? Huh? He started to observe the larvae. One of the adult cockroaches offered to go after them since there was no danger. The cockroach agreed, after all. It couldn't let those worms take all the food. First, the adult cockroaches rushed in. If any enemies appeared, they would eat the larvae first. The nauseous one was tremendously indignant after all. The adult cockroaches could fly and were prohibiting, and he only calling that bunch of useless lazy bones. Suddenly something caught that guy's attention and he turned to see a huge red eye right in front of him. He was tremendously horrified, really scared. Now, Jerome realized that those stones weren't stones at all, but rather cursed frogs. A tremendous trap for them, can you believe it? They were camouflaged, looking like stones, to make the victim fall into the trap. While the fat guy cried out in despair, the frog had already attacked with its tongue. Joey ordered everyone to run as fast as possible, but the frogs were faster, and several cockroaches met perhaps a heroic end in JoJo's system. And there was an enemy nearby, and it was a mutant frog. These frogs were stronger than the normal ones, but they had one weakness. They couldn't see stationary prey. The fat guy screamed in fear, but Joel told him not to move. After all, the frogs couldn't see still things. Meanwhile, the god Cockroach wanted to give Joey a choice. On one side, he would show a safe route for him to escape. On the other, he had to save another cockroach and accept the first kick from the loyal one on the path to becoming the god king Cockroach. Joey didn't understand anything the god of the cockroach was saying. How could someone become the king of cockroaches if they died, huh? Suddenly, the guy turned and looked at the fat guy. Joey instantly remembered the betrayal. The time he expected someone to come back and help him, poor thing. Meanwhile, the god Cockroach was making a countdown. Joey took the fat cockroach by the hand and flew with her, really straining himself. But he remembered that he wanted someone to save him, just like he was doing now. Speaking of which, that guy really needed to go on a diet because it's the first time I've seen a fat cockroach. The fat guy now began to praise the cockroach, saying he loved her. But Joel told him to shut up because his breath smelled like crap. That crap breath. What the hell? A giant frog opened its mouth to swallow the couple of cockroaches, and now the turning point has arrived. The knee pushed the fat one forward, sacrificing himself. Damn, the last thing the fat one saw was his brother Cockroach, Joey, in the mouth of that sneaky frog. One bite and Lau was done for. Joey passed the test of the cockroach god. That touched the god of cockroaches, and now Joey had a system available and heard an amen. Then, the ability to absorb all things was activated. Joey began to gain new skills. Sticky tongue, the acid mutant frog slime. Wow, how disgusting. Meanwhile, the mutant frog's head exploded, spewing green blood everywhere. For dessert, Joey received an extremely special prize. Yes, he underwent a body transformation. Now he was not just any little cockroach, he was a catch for the cockroaches. Joey emerged from the mutant body shouting happily that he had come back. The cockroach god was tremendously impressed that Joey had kept goodness in his heart in a completely difficult situation. Now he was worthy of becoming his follower. Joey didn't understand anything. Did he really have to turn into a cockroach again? The cockroach god explained that cockroaches are cockroaches, kind of immortal, since Joey was immortal, so why worry about appearance, huh? Joey wasn't very good at history or interpretation in school, and asked the god to explain in a simpler, clearer way because he wasn't understanding anything. A tremendously irritated cockroach god began to explain that Joey now had the power of immortality, even in his human form. Joey was now extremely excited. Finally, luck was smiling at him. Maybe he wouldn't need to turn into a cockroach again. Meanwhile, the cockroach god felt relieved because Joey hadn't abandoned the next one, even knowing he was an insect. Suddenly, Joey felt something underfoot. It was the fat cockroach beneath his foot. Damn, and it was in critical condition, where the cockroaches didn't like it at all. He had crushed the friend he had just saved. Joel has now realized that he had turned human again since he saved the fat guy. Was he going to turn into a cockroach again now that he had killed the fat guy? The cockroach was that Joey had the god of cockroaches on his tail. The guy thought that his life would depend on his acting skills. The moment the cockroach god wanted to do something with Joey, he started to cry. He cried because the god had let him live. Joey had wholeheartedly lifted that fat guy, and now he was sprawled out, crushed on the ground. So let fate take him away, because he couldn't live without his brother, the fat cockroach. Oh God, I thought the two had a strong bond. Then he said that the fat guy wasn't dead and asked Joel not to cry. It turns out that the fat guy isn't dead and will never die because he is the protector as long as Joey is alive. The fat guy can resurrect. Rodrigo explained that Joey needed to kill mutant monsters to gather energy and resurrect him again. In that moment, Joey realized that the world was small and that those frogs weren't going to escape him. The guy turned into a titan, like those giants from Attack on Titan, and said that he would make those frogs remember that day forever. After all, he knows that frogs feel tremendous fear of humans. But suddenly, a frog started jumping on Joey's body. In the next moment, the frog landed a strong blow to his face, but Joey grabbed the frog right away and began to crush it in his hand since he didn't have the strength to face the giant. The cockroach god warned the guy not to touch the mutant frogs. That frog slime was corroding his flesh. While Joey fought with the frogs, he was throwing punches at others. One of the frogs was looking at Joey right in front of him, apparently having a worm, only it was hairy. What could that be? But suddenly, by instinct, he opened his mouth wide to give that worm a lick, and the frog whipped the whole worm out of Joel with a tremendous flick and pulled. Joel screamed in pain. "Are you crazy?" Apparently that wasn't a worm, but rather another type of worm. He held the worm in one hand and the frog in the other. Still trembling with pain, he squeezed the frog hard. Wow, what a scene. Are you crazy? And he, now with his hands corrected, turned to the god of roaches and said he couldn't deal with those mutant frogs. But the roach god immediately called him an idiot because he was fighting without using his abilities. What a fool. Now, Joel wondered, powers. What powers are we talking about? Joey didn't understand anything. Then, the roach god explained that, like a frog, he had skills and antibodies. The more monsters he ate, the stronger he would become. How bizarre. He has to eat anything to become a god. Wow, apparently there's some bizarre food in front of him. So Joey decided to roast the frog. First, how disgusting. But the roach god just shoved a frog into Joey's mouth, making him super uncomfortable, slime and all. Everything, yes, I'm nauseous. He was crazy for power. But when he tasted the frog, he only felt an extremely horrible taste in his mouth. A torture. Nauseous, started to vomit because he couldn't swallow that. What agony, man. The roach god said that if he didn't eat, he would become food for the frogs surrounding him. A tremendous pressure. 2 seconds later, Joey was already surrounded by frogs, in trouble. At that moment, Joey thought, wow, he worked so hard for his baby, and now he can't even eat a little frog. No, the meat is entering his mouth, but why isn't he feeling that much disgust? Anyway, Joey did what he had to do. The system announced that after absorbing the frog, it had detected biological abilities. Acid jump, frog jump, muscle stretching. A perfect combo, my friends. Joey realized that the frog's abilities were not working with him. A huge disappointment. Poor guy. He started to stomp, kick, and killed several frogs one by one. A tremendous massacre for the frogs. And then he even got bored because now he was invincible. But suddenly Joey was blinded by an immense, strong light that came down. He, surprised and looking closely, saw that it was a group of people who thought Joey was a tremendous pervert naked in the middle of the city. How was he going to explain what he was doing with frogs in the middle of the street, still naked? There was no way to explain anything there, right? But he was happy to see his buddies who came to save him. And then he was in the middle of the desert with huge military trucks in front and armed soldiers coming out of them. What a scene, my brother. Seeing the symbol on the armored vehicle that said Elimination Squad, and he realized who he was dealing with and remembered he had heard about this organization in a past life. They were elite warriors protecting humanity from monsters during that apocalypse. Their job was nothing more and nothing less than fighting the monsters on Earth and in the dimensions, maintaining order and protecting everyone in the city. Everyone living under their protection had returned to a tremendously peaceful life, so encountering him meant things were dire. A whip would crack and a bullet would ricochet, but he still had hope. He shouted that his buddies had come to save him, and in the next moment he got shot multiple times and fell to the ground in shock, realizing that saving him was the last thing they wanted. The guys wanted to send him to the land of the dead, feet first to the grave. He fell to the ground and the soldiers kept shooting just to make sure the target was eliminated. 3 warriors in heavy armor approached his body and said they were ready for capture. Joey, almost dead, raised his hand and tried to protest. Wait, but his body was shaking and the soldiers didn't care at all. The system activated, warning that he could now control all the muscles in his body. The guys began to notice that the target was still moving. Then, a squad. Leader started shouting to everyone that this target was very dangerous. Everyone started to get into a fighting stance. I got nauseous. I tried to negotiate using speech as a jutsu. But hey everyone, wait, I'm not a criminal. Let me explain, please. But the response was simply gunfire, bullets, and suddenly, a woman's voice gave a new order to take him away. Peepo, damn it, saved by the bell once again by a woman. Joey was incredibly furious. What the hell is happening? They don't understand what he's saying. Seeing that negotiation wasn't going to work, the warriors surrounded him, closing in and preparing to attack. Once again, one of the warrior guards threw an energy whip at him, which ensnared his entire body, leaving him immobilized. He was hanging between the motorcycles, his body stretched out. He screamed, utterly exhausted, realizing he was trapped and couldn't escape. At that moment, the system alerted him to a new ability, rough iodine, which corrodes any kind of material. When those guys tried to tie him up again, he instinctively used the iodine. The ropes burned. The girl with purple hair watched this with great interest, realizing he was clever. Joey tried to escape, but one of the guys caught up to him. However, the guy's moon acid started to dissolve completely, and he lost control entirely. The squad, utterly surprised, and one of the soldiers looked on with interest at the acid on his arm, and suddenly that guy lunged at him, trying to punch him. Joey dodged, but the attack was incredibly fast and super strong. Another guy appeared wanting to knock Joey out, but he easily dodged the attack. Joey screamed, extremely desperate, outraged by the tremendous injustice. Where are the cheaters, huh? At that moment, the system activated his ability, and soon Joey advanced, suddenly an incredibly amazing speed. What power, my friends. When he landed, he was extremely surprised but happy because that ability had worked. Phew, right? Looking at his pursuers, he smiled, confident. Realizing he had a chance to escape while jumping, he started teasing the guys. Do they still want to catch him? But his expression changed completely when he sensed something was extremely wrong in the air. His leg was yanked hard by the light whip, and he lost his balance completely. Now, his luck was beginning to turn into bad fortune. The girl with purple hair sitting in the car started to smile. So, she thought he was going to escape, right? No, she threw him aside effortlessly, and he screamed as he fell to the ground. In the next instant, the whip cracked and caught him again. He began to panic again upon seeing that he was trapped once more. Joey was all tied up with purple wires, and the girl with purple hair who was near him asked the soldier what his number was. The soldier simply said it was 13. Wow, the number that everyone likes. Without giving Joey time to think, the girl got off the bike, dragging him, while he screamed in pain, getting completely scraped. Joey tried to break free, shouting to be spared, but the cars kept moving, completely disregarding his pleas, treating him like a mere kind of animal. Soon, they arrived at the base city, protected by extremely large and strong walls, where the convoy was headed. One of the guards at the gate saw the vice captain, Helen, returning and ordered the Redbird gate to be opened. Meanwhile, Elaine warned not to open too many gates, or else the monsters could take the opportunity to enter that city and throw a party. She entered the fortress skillfully, while continuing to drag her knee, and could only scream, poor thing, in pain. He ended up being taken to the Elimination Squad's prison, where the next stop was already waiting for him. Walking down the corridor in a striped prison jumpsuit, he tried to make a joke and started to complain that even after the apocalypse, it was illegal to walk around nude. Of course, it's illegal to walk around nude. In the meantime, one of the guys in the white coat was tremendously surprised because this time, the prisoner not only knew what was going on, but he could also speak differently from the other 12. But he didn't immediately let him know not to face that situation as a joke, because he was screwed. In 1 week, he had encountered a total of 12 strange people who were completely naked, unable to speak, and just laughing like idiots. She looked at all those naked people locked in the cell. Their poses were completely weird. The gaze was tremendously vacant, and their movements resembled dumb animals. It was as if they were not human, you know? One of the scientists started saying to kill them quickly, to not waste time, a cruel and painless death. The other one began to argue that if they started killing those creatures just because they were stupid and ugly, it wouldn't be any different from the monsters outside the city walls. A hero finally understood why he had been imprisoned. He was imprisoned because he resembled those weirdos. Shocked, he began to panic upon hearing about genetic analysis. In his mind, he prayed to Godbug if they could be discovered by genetic analysis. At that moment, he received a message from the system stating that genetic analysis, and his eyes widened in horror. He was screwed. They entered a dark room. Aileen said it didn't matter if he was a freak or just like those creatures. He was going to stay there for the night. The scientist was a bit intrigued, looked at the cameras and thought, surprised, could someone have messed with the others? Because the cells were empty. In one of them, there was a bald guy sitting in prisoner clothes. He remained silent, and Aiden stared at him with a tremendously tense face. Suddenly, the head of one of the prisoners began to grow huge, like a bizarre balloon, and Aiden was shocked by what he saw. Our boy looked in shock. The women around were clearly scared. One of them said they were flying through the ceiling. Damn! A guy, overcome with fear, shouted, "What the hell is this?" The frightening heads of the prisoners descended from the ceiling with twisted bones. In horrible grimaces, a tremendous nightmare. One of those flying heads now started to open a tremendously scary smile. What horror, my brother! The lifeless eyes pointed down at that terrible scene. The guy was now paralyzed, and one of the prisoners slowly raised his head and began to make an extremely weird noise, confirming that something terrible was about to happen. The bald prisoner tied up suddenly began a transformation. His face, his head started to stretch, and his eyes began to glow with a sinister light. He opened a horrifying, terrifying smile, a genuine transformation, and suddenly that head exploded, revealing a brain full of eyes and a horrible mess of eyes and teeth. That was no longer a man, no, it was an incarnation of nightmare. The woman and the young man turned in panic, tremendously frightened to see what was happening around them. That creature had transformed into a monster. It unleashed some huge red tentacles, advancing towards them at a staggering speed. The guy panicked, trying to evade the attack as the tentacles came at him. The monster took full form, an ugly, muscular body with a scary smile, full of extremely sharp teeth and multiple eyes. What horror! The purple-haired woman entered a fighting stance, preparing to defend herself as the tentacles swiftly moved toward her. That purple-haired girl said it was now clear who the real monster was. One of the scientists was tremendously horrified to see that body starting to get covered in extremely strange and frightening spots. She panicked. The spots spread across her body, turning her skin into a deformed mess. She was screaming in fear and pain. Our protagonist was also infected, but he didn't lose his composure. He quickly realized he needed to get out of there. Suddenly, a message appeared warning about parasitism. He needed to do something urgent, or he would turn into a zombie. The scene was was tremendously tense. The monster spoke with a threatening voice that it wanted her body, putting her in an even more frightening situation. Helen, now greatly surprised, did not expect that monster to be capable of speech. She had never seen a creature like that before. The monster now took possession of the scientists' bodies and used them as a meat shield to attack Aelin. The girl quickly activated her power, creating threads of energy to defend herself, and flew through the air, showing agility and strength, a true heroine. Aelin realized it was difficult to deal with parasitic monsters, but she noticed that they were still human and could not be killed. Moreover, she had no magical crystals, and her abilities were useless there. What bad luck. But soon she spotted a scalpel on the table, a light at the end of the tunnel. Using her skills, I grabbed the scalpel and threw it at the monster with impeccable aim, but the sneaky monster used 2 scientists as human shields, a tremendous coward. Seeing this, he pulled the thread back, and the blade of the scalpel got closer to one of the girl's faces, but just barely. And then, does she need plastic surgery? Holding the knee with his tentacles, the monster called the people weak, a tremendously ugly and arrogant monster. Joey was nervous because he didn't have time to eat the spores before they returned, but then he told him to stop complaining and swallow it already. The system announced that the parasitic spores had been ingested. The ability to resist the parasites began to increase. Good, a genuine antidote. Soon, the ability evolved to 10 and then to 46. Almost there, Aelin heard the monster mock her and spoke up, saying that he was insulting her, right? She threw the blade at the monster again, saying that only a coward would hide behind hostages. The monster, seeing the girl's attack, said it wouldn't matter because he was going to hit his friends, but it seemed the girl had a plan. The blade suddenly changed direction and went towards the monster. Extremely clever she is. The monster became extremely irritated and furious. The attack struck his arms and back, and he began to scream in pain because he didn't expect the attack to work. He thought the monster's body wasn't strong enough, so he had to use living creatures as shields. But what happened? The girls suddenly started to feel pain in the same places where the blades had hit the monster. Wow, how strange. He wasn't understanding anything. The monster began to explain that the girl had hurt him, and he had merely transferred all the pain and injuries to the girls, and his wounds were starting to heal. A really bizarre thing. He realized that this ability was extremely problematic. And then suddenly, the monster began to say that the girl had been captured. A tremendously tense scene. Amy looked at her hand and saw that something was happening. Her hand started to shine with a tremendously sinister red light. Soon, her hand stopped obeying and began to strangle her. The monster said she wouldn't succeed because she couldn't destroy the spores. Now she was in his hands in tremendous danger, but suddenly the monster's gaze changed. The girl started to laugh. A tremendously strange scene. Aelin explained that she was lucky to be able to control it, and said that he could infect another person, but her web controlled more than just the enemy's body. Heine used the thread to control the infected right arm with the scalpel, and the thread cut where the spores were located to prevent complete contamination. She is so smart. She even smiled. It was a shame for the monster that everything had ended that way. The monster now agreed that she had managed to free herself, but he said that using that thing too many times the girl would bleed and wouldn't be able to fight anymore, and besides that, if he tried to escape, the monster promised to kill the girls and escape as well, but he said he was going to chop that monster into pieces and that it wouldn't have a painless death. Even if the monster begged her to leave, she wouldn't run away. Meanwhile, Joey kept absorbing the spores, which also caught the monster's attention. He wondered why he couldn't control that guy, and then decided to kill Joey first, but the guy broke the chains. At that moment, he realized he couldn't dodge the monster's attack and thought he was going to die right there. What terrible luck. And at that moment, a purple web started to appear around his body. The next instant, he pulled his knee close to him, saving him from the monster's attack. The monster did not like that at all, and was now wondering how this could happen. Then he fell to the ground, looking at Eni's black panties and thanked the goddess for saving him. Moreover, it seemed like he had seen a miracle, but Aiden looked at Joey as if he were a piece of trash, grabbed him by his clothes, and asked if he had been a pervert from the start. They are aware that she found him naked, right? Aiden let the guy go and came to a conclusion. Since the monsters couldn't infect him, he had 2 options. First, they die together. Second, she stops the monster, and he tells the world everything. Joey didn't know what, to say, but he took a step forward and said he was choosing the third plan. She didn't understand anything. What plan? Third plan? Joey said they were going to team up to turn that guy into a vegetable together. A truly bold plan. Aiden was surprised that Joey wanted to do that, risking his own life. At that moment, Joey remembered the time of his death, the time he was completely abandoned. What Joey hated most about people was when, out of fear, they threw others to be eaten and killed by monsters. The guy said, "Who abandons friends? It's worse than a monster now." That girl was surprised, and she was incredibly brave. A brave weirdo, but she also called him a retard in her head. To be honest, Joey was extremely confident because the system said the monster was really weak and was only strong because of its paralysis abilities. Normal attacks worked on that creature. With that in mind, Joey Joey would be able to live happily and work in the area protected by the elimination squad. The monster was now immensely furious, believing that humans were inferior creatures to him because even in battle he thought about impressing the opposite sex. Now he was tremendously disgusted. The monster began attacking the couple with its deadly tentacles. Joey saw that he was of no use in the fight, so he asked Aileen to control his body. He admitted that he wasn't afraid of paralysis, but he wasn't good at fighting. The girl agreed, but warned that she couldn't guarantee his safety. She activated the wire abilities, releasing threads that wrapped around Joey's body. The energy of the threads filled his body completely, making his muscles faster and more precise. Now that girl had taken full control of him and got ready to attack under Aileen's command, and then she advanced. Now, that monster taunted more, saying that its tentacles were inevitable. The monster said Joey wouldn't be able to break through the puppets. Aileen, without wasting any time, began to activate all her power, giving more strength to Joey. Joey sprang into action, and Aileen coordinated all his movements with tremendous precision. Those red threads lunged at the foe, but he kept moving. The girl pulled the threads, and Joey dodged the attacks with incredible confidence. Wow, what a dodge! He charged forward, and soon activated his ability. The system screen confirmed that the full activation had begun. His body started to glow, radiating an intense light along with the muscle stretching abilities and the iodine. Acid activated, he charged at the monster with an attack accompanied by an extremely powerful energy. An enemy monster began to decompose due to the acid, letting out tremendously agonizing screams, feeling a deep pain. The girl began to watch, tremendously surprised, not knowing that Joey had such an ability. The acid continued to corrode the monster's flesh, and it started to lose its shape. Joey finally delivered a final blow, destroying the entire body of the monster, an extremely sinister victory. But the monster did not give up, stating that it could withstand the damage and would survive. Suddenly, it noticed something strange. Panic appeared in its eyes. The red monster panicked at the sight of the wound that was not healing. It saw the girl sitting next to the two people lying down and looked at her, surprised. The girl spoke with a smug smile that she had already gotten rid of the spores. She was holding something disgusting, covered in blood, in her hand, and crushed it with tremendous ease. Observing the result, it admitted, laughing, that it liked seeing the monster that way. She is quite cruel, too. The monster fell silent, its eyes wide with horror upon realizing that it had lost control of the situation. Suddenly, it opened its mouth. Strange rumors began to come out of it. The swollen heads began to explode, with blood spraying everywhere, painting the entire place. Joey and Aiden looked on in surprise, not understanding what the monster was doing. Joey did not understand anything. The monster was taking blood from the corpses. The creature began to transform, and its body started to tremble and change. A menacing eye appeared, extremely sinister. The two, extremely tense, began to look and concentrate to try to understand what was happening. The blood began to bubble and formed a new, sinister mass that seemed irreversible. The waves of blood, they continued to spin, forming a vortex. Something even more dangerous. A huge and new creature, completely different, appeared, made of blood, with red eyes, exuding an imminent threat. The creature transformed completely, screaming uncontrollably. Its body took on a new, even more horrifying shape, bringing tremendous terror. It laughed mockingly, claiming it was the first time the humans had seen its true face and hoped not to disappoint. That creature lunged to attack at once. The speed was so great that the girl barely had time to react. She was thrown back with tremendous force against the wall. The impact was so strong that the metal wall crumpled entirely. Our protagonist turned, horrified, realizing the situation had taken a disastrous turn, that things were grim. Eden was gasping for breath, poor thing, blood flowing from her mouth. She realized that the enemy's level of power was far greater than she had anticipated. A red hand made of it. The monster wasted no time. It grabbed her and flung her aside with force like a rag doll. The girl flew through the air, crashing against the walls at tremendous speed and brutal force. But the monster did not stop there. On the contrary, it followed her with the intent to finish what it had started. Now, the girl fell, breaking the stones beneath her. Her body was covered in wounds, and her mind was confused, in tremendous pain. The monster approached slowly, observing her despair with a predator's smile. Suddenly, something hit it, causing it to stop immediately. It was surprised. Who dares to attack it? It turned its head and saw the guy standing behind it. But our protagonist now panicked at the sight of the changed situation, but it was too late to turn back. The guy, very scared, faced the monster advancing in his direction. With the speed of a monster, the guy could only fly after a tremendous strong blow from the beast, blood gushing from his mouth. What a hit! He slammed against the wall with force, leaving a deep mark from the impact. A message appears on the screen. Danger. With broken bones all over his body and damaged internal organs, the system starts to inform him that fatal damage has been detected and that the immortality ability remains active. A regeneration process is about to begin. Soon, his body recovers recovers and the damage disappears. He feels a deep relief, and his legs regain their strength as he slowly gets up. An absurd recovery. He wakes up screaming in terror, thinking he's dying, but it was only a scare with that little cockroach. God starts warning him not to move, because if he gets hit again, he cannot guarantee a recovery like this one. One knee is lying on the ground, pressed, and he realizes that the only way out is to play dead. The plan is obvious, but he barely opens his eyes to observe the scene, telling the girl to hold on tight because the victory depends on her, their last hope. The monster, exuding an aura of terrifying authority, approaches while the knee remains paralyzed, hoping the enemy loses interest in him. But, still very scared, the monster looks at the fallen body with deep disdain, smiling and says, "Ah boy, so weak, so weak. What arrogance to think you can attack and defeat me." Suddenly, a blow is heard, and the monster shrinks back. Unexpectedly, the attack was a complete surprise to him. The girl charges to attack at an immense speed, aiming for the monster's head. The monster reacts faster than she could expect, intercepting her leg, avoiding the attack, and throws her aside with force onto the ground again, making everything shake where she hit. The monster didn't want to stop and hurled the girl straight to the ceiling with tremendous brutality. Aiden was bleeding. Just a little more and it would be over. The monster ripped a metal chair, saying that once they had trapped him there, claiming he was uncomfortable. He grabbed the metal chair and threw it at the girl who was on the ground, and she hit the wall with such force that she could no longer move. Both her legs were broken, poor thing, and the girl was in a lot of pain. I think she was heading to the land of the no more movement or the grave, but she still managed to control her arm. Joey started to observe what was happening and realized he couldn't help. Not even the squad's vice champion could destroy the monster. Who would save them? And at that moment, someone called Joan. It was a scholarly person asking to give him something. In their hands, there was a red crystal that would unleash her power. Joey took the crystal, but realized he didn't know how he would give the stone to her. The monster was getting closer to the girl. At that moment, the cheap god appeared and told Joey to get to the girl, using the ability to stretch his muscles. You guys know he acquired the frog's ability, right? Why isn't he using it? And by his calculations, the chance of success was 10%, and he didn't like that at all because it was very low. But the god made him choose 10% chance of success or 100% chance of dying without doing anything. He then started to grind his teeth, knowing he had no options. Decided, he started to rise, activating the muscle stretching ability, and said, "To hell with it." Joel ran towards the girl, but the monster noticed immediately. The cheap god didn't expect the monster to react so quickly. The chance of survival dropped to less than 5%. What bad luck, my brother. In this case, Joel had to fight, leaping onto the monster's head. My god. It was said that now only 1% of a chance was left, but Joey seemed to have made it. But the monster grabbed his leg and asked what he thought he was doing. Now, the chance of success had 0%. Joey lay on the ground in a movement that looked like a complete disaster, shaking everything. The monster decided to crush the guy's head first. Joey began to think that he had no chance of achieving anything, but still, it was his last chance. With a movement, he threw the red crystal to her, an incredibly bold move. Then, the monster crushed Joey with its huge foot. The young man started to scream, calling him a weak young man, a real insect. But his gaze changed towards the foot. He saw that the young man was still alive, being wrapped in a purple thread. It seems that your red monster is in trouble now. A cheap god was now smiling, thinking. That was when the monster realized that the web was connected to the girl. Meanwhile, the girl said she was touched that Joey had delivered the crystal, risking his own life. At that moment, a purple web began to wrap around her body, and the monster also started to be absorbed by the web, which did not please him at all, poor thing. The girl pulled the web, and the monster lost all balance and fell to the ground. She began to call upon the power of the spider and jump to end the fight once and for all. But it wasn't over yet. The red monster was alive and saying that humans were pathetic and weak. Even using the power, he broke the sword in half with his tremendous strength, then grabbed the woman by the neck and began to squeeze, stabbing her body mercilessly, splattering blood all over the room. Joey, bracing his arm on the ground, knelt holding his wound, and in the distance, the monster was still standing. She was hanging, limp, with the tentacle stuck to her body, and our boy realized that the situation was terrible. There was almost no chance of victory, poor thing. The monster looked at her and said, "Die, pathetic insect." Suddenly, a flash of red light, as if something was exploding, but it was blood. The monster trembled at its base with a surprised look. Its arms were torn off, and Joey also noticed and widened his eyes at that moment. He also didn't expect that, and at that moment, a tall guy with long hair appeared carrying the woman. For everyone's surprise, soon more guys showed up wearing the same armor. The young man began to frown and asked who they were. Now, more people joined his little party. 3 guys in high-tech armor appeared there. One of them was holding her by the waist. She was badly hurt. Poor thing. She saw the body on the ground and paused to examine it carefully, assessing the state, and said that the entrails, bones, and muscles were all dead. The situation was quite critical. The woman took out the green crystal and said she was going to start the treatment. She was introduced as the captain of the 10th squad. A red-haired guy, holding the woman, said that no monster would hurt them. He was the captain of the 2nd squad. The 3rd guy laughed and said he would have fun with that monster. He was none other than Commander Karen, and they started warning the monster that it was not ordinary, that it should be careful. But Karen just listened and said that he was special too, and didn't take that threat seriously. The woman with white hair, extremely irritated, told the two to be quiet because she needed silence to continue the healing treatment. She then raised the green crystal, extremely focused. That crystal began to shine, radiating a green light using a healing ability. How effective would it be? The green energy entered the ground, activating a spell. Huge flowers began to appear with injured people inside. The girl and the other woman woke up inside the cocoons, and a guy in armor was coming towards them. He was in one of the flowers and looked around, surprised at the flower cocoons. A warmth began to envelop his whole body, as if he were in a hot spring. He felt his wounds being completely healed and knitting together. He began to relax, feeling a deep relief. And suddenly a god cockroach appeared and screamed right in his ear. Joel screamed in pain, and from a distance the girl said it shouldn't have hurt that much. That creature smiled and told Joey to watch the fight because there was a show ahead. The armored guy introduced himself as Karen William, the squad commander, and spoke to the creature. The monster replied that it didn't negotiate with food. The atmosphere began to change and heated up significantly. The two stood face to face, not averting their gaze. Suddenly, blood started to flow down the walls. The armored guy looked up. The monster began to say that it had already devoured all of its brothers who had been there. The creature, surrounded by its blood relatives, said everyone was going to the grave. The monster started to laugh, waving all its tentacles. Joey now started to look around, afraid and very anxious. He began to scream, realizing that there were monsters everywhere. The situation seemed tremendously desperate. A warrior with mechanical arms advanced, focused, gathering strength to attack. That warrior struck the ground hard, unleashing chains and energy. They spread out, forming whirlpools that began to destroy several monsters at once. Gusts of wind obliterated the creatures, and bodies flew in every direction, screams and blood everywhere, a tremendous carnage. The force of the impact gave the monsters no chance. They exploded in the air, grunting, unable to do anything. The green-haired mage stepped aside, observing that tremendous situation, and realized they were surrounded and had to act quickly. She began to use magic and created a barrier of whirlpools, protecting herself and her friends. That barrier became an obstacle, and those monster enemies couldn't get through. Our protagonist watched what was happening, impressed by his friend's powers, but he could only stand by and watch, the poor guy. The creature smiles, looking at that guy, saying that it has taken down 2 commanders at once and decides to deal with him first. A thick liquid begins to bubble and rise around the monster. The creature starts sucking in the substance, laughing. Its body begins to swell and grow, its muscles becoming tremendously strong and ripped. The monster now, with Saljo sitting on the flower, watches in shock. The monster has transformed for the 3rd time. Wow, he thought this was completely unfair. That guy starts commenting on the monster's shapeshifting ability and says that he needs to prepare better to face him. The monster doesn't listen and attacks, yelling, with a punch right in his face. But that guy stops, becoming syntactic, immobile. Suddenly he sidesteps and says that the attack shows that the monster's reflexes are very poor, a fine example of a trash monster. The monster now gets disgusted and, shouting, begins to unleash several attacks, using all its various arms at once, including a hook. But the guy manages to jump and dodge that blow. Soon comes a right-hand attack, but the guy manages to dodge that too. The monster then tries to grab him since little is going right. The guy dodges again. The young man starts grunting and tells that guy to stop dodging and just stand still, taking the hits. Then, the guy jumps up, but suddenly some tentacles come out, and one of those tentacles grabs him. Or not. Now he has been caught, and the monster starts grunting, roaring and saying that now it has him. But he begins to draw his sword confidently and delivers several consecutive slashes to that monster. In the following moments, he falls to the ground. The monster was sliced in the air while it is there, watching the pieces of the monster still falling to the ground. The monster keeps asking what could have happened. Trembling with fear, it looks at the guy's finger, and soon after, the guy bursts the entire body of the monster, just with the shock of his finger. Wow, what a strong guy. The monster is now reduced in its slightly smaller version, resembling an octopus with a brain and several eyes. He just slaps the monster and grabs it, then throws it into a capsule and, smiling, says that he finally got it. He managed to catch that monster he had long wanted and pursued. The captain begins to say that he was the one who first captured the talking monster and suggests giving it a name. He yells, extremely irritated, saying that those guys only think about entertainment, but how are they going to explain the complete destruction of the lab? Joey watches from afar, sitting on the flower, still shocked by the brutal power difference. He receives an ironic comment from one of the cockroaches, and soon after, he falls asleep. Then, we are taken to a regular apartment building. Joey opens his eyes and realizes he is now in a bathroom, looking around, not knowing where he is. In panic, he sees he is in a bathtub full of water. His face is quite confused and he hears a sound, seeing a figure behind the curtain, apparently a girl. His eyes widen instantly. He is shocked. The girl peeking behind the curtain asks if he is awake, explains that the genetic analysis isn't finished and that the rules require him to spend a night in custody. Since a prison was destroyed, she took him into custody. The guy wonders if they really need to be together, and then, completely naked and wet, the girl, with her arms crossed, replies that he is just exaggerating because he is only in warm water and has no other option. She introduces herself to him as Ellen, the vice commander, and reminds him to say his own name. The guy tries to remember his name and, stuttering, says that it's probably Joey. The girl puts her foot in the water, entering the bathtub, and asks him to move away. Our protagonist watches as she gets into the bathtub. He, still completely embarrassed and panicking, observes the girl, but he is aware that he has never seen the girl as she came into the world. That guy is a legitimate virgin. If it were me, things would heat up there. You know what I'm talking about? The girl sitting in the bathtub asks the young man to turn to her because she wants to examine all the wounds. The guy, feeling her touch on his body, starts to panic, shocked. And it's good that she couldn't see his body from the front, because if he were standing, she would be able to see the hairy worm the frog wrapped with its tongue that day. While examining the body, she notices that the wounds are completely healed. The girl begins to say that his abilities are quite interesting, where the boy realizes that his pulse is speeding up and the beats are increasing, hormones rising, and something growing. She offers to activate the reproduction mode. The guy panics. What? Reproduction? Are you crazy? And he declines immediately. That guy is definitely a virgin. Are you crazy, bro? He's really scared of women. She now asks to check the scars on his chest. After all, that monster was tremendously brutal. Then he turns around and starts to realize that he has never seen anything so big in his life, while she is saying that the captain had healed her and the scars are still there. If he doesn't believe her, she just pushes her hair to the side and asks him to look at those scars. Wow. Meanwhile, the little cockroach is activating the reproduction mode in 5, 4, 3, 2, and before finishing the countdown, that guy gets up from the bathtub and runs out. Are you crazy? And slams the door with tremendous force, and she is left not understanding what is happening inside the bathtub, and he is already in his room, tremendously embarrassed. Are you crazy? If he had stayed one more second in there, he would have been even more embarrassed. And he wonders what that reproduction mode of the system is, how it works. Then, suddenly, the television starts showing some news. Recent spatial fluctuations detected near the city of Bingai, a small human outpost. 50 kilometers away, run by non-governmental forces, it was attacked. That place is where he lived. Did everyone die? The news keeps coming. When the termination squad arrived there, the whole post had already been abandoned. If he hadn't left, he probably would have died there too. He stops and thinks while listening to the news. The guy keeps saying that citizens are reminded. Abysses are portals to supernatural realms, and if anyone detects one, they should report to the authorities immediately. A little cockroach soon appears, telling him to stop overthinking. And anyway, there's some really interesting news for him. The little chubby, squished one is back, 100% of his life. That guy is his imperial guard from now on. The little chubby guy is immortal, no matter how many times he gets squished. As long as our protagonist is alive, he will come back to life. It seems that ability is a very powerful one. No, but how can a cockroach that never dies be a guard for a human? He still doesn't understand. The guy just said that the cockroach can level up to him too. Right now, he can share vision with him. He touches and summons that fat cockroach, and soon she appears calling him dear brother. He missed her so much, and he notices that his big brother looks kind of ugly now. He doesn't like humans much, but the cockroach knows how to walk. To fly, just close your eyes and he will sync with the vision of that cockroach. The guy starts to fly, hits the wall, then passes through the door and goes to the bathroom. Look what he found, and our protagonist is there with full vision, not believing what that cockroach is doing there. He quickly tells the cockroach to get out of there. The cockroach just said she thought that deep down, he might feel like he wanted to take a peek. Without a doubt, the woman is sitting there in the bathtub, pensive. Then suddenly, she unleashes her purple threads on the cockroach, and she is completely pulverized in the air. Still, our protagonist feels the burning sensation in his body and falls hard to the ground. A god cockroach. You forgot to mention that when he shares senses with the fat one, if he dies, he will also suffer a completely negative reaction. At dusk and dawn of the second day, they receive a test report, and the girl only says everything is normal. He looks, and she says he is free to go, he can leave. He places the results on the table and starts to get deep in thought, telling her he wants to join the extermination squad too. But she, still crossing her arms, says their mortality rate is ridiculously high. Does he still want to join? Maybe he will just die on the battlefield. And he tells her that maybe the survivors survival rate among normal people is better. That's what she is saying. He is also an awakened one and knows he can manage to fight alongside her. He yells at her again, asking if he can join or not. She realizes he is determined. The quadrennial extermination squad selection tournament is in 7 days, and if his skills aren't bad, he can get in. But rumors say this year's competition is the toughest in history. Yet he remains determined and just asks her to take care of this for him. After all, she is not the type to ignore debts, right? He managed to save her life. She looks down and asks him to wait. She admits his blatant persistence. While they talk, a guy is watching everything, sneaking in the shadows. She simply said she would give him a chance, a special training. Let's say a doctor there is asking why the captain told him to falsify the medical report tests for that guy, because clearly the reports showed something inhuman. A guy, an economist of words, says this will be the little secret between the two from now on. I hope this video can hit 1,000 likes and 200 comments for the next part. That's all for today, and thank you, and stay tuned for the next video. Suddenly, they are already in the training room at the entrance to the abyss, but without anyone pressing any buttons, that steel ball starts to move. And then he remains incredulous. After all, training is being thrown into the abyss. Is this for real? Are you kidding me? That abyss is filled with monsters, and the monsters inside are much stronger than those outside. He thinks that not even an army would stand a chance against those monsters. How are they going to jump into an abyss and be considered training? He looks back, and judging by his team, there are only 4 teenagers: Justin, Surao, Sukai, and Songtan. The girl says that each abyss connects to another world, and depending on the deterioration of that world relative to theirs, the danger classification ranges from E to S. The higher the classification, the stronger the monsters and the larger the area. That gate over there leads to an abyss already explored by the extermination squad. She then starts to open the portal, explaining that the extermination squad's function is to go in there and expel all the monsters, thus delaying the invasion from the other world. To that reality, she explains that those abysses are tunnels left by giant worms during the Great Cataclysm. Suddenly, she pushes the button to open the portal and places herself right in the middle. Now the portal is open, and Justin, who has experience in the abyss, will lead that team. He understands and accepts. Suddenly, they are already in a dense forest, a very dark and silent jungle of classification, and all he sees is brush and gigantic trees. Wow, so this is what an abyss is like. Out of nowhere, gigantic monkeys and enormous snakes begin to watch them. Wow! And Joey notices that it's not just a monkey and a snake, but rather a monkey with a snake's tail. But then he looks to the side and sees a giant spider and starts to get terrified. After all, those trees are enormous and very tall. He starts to wonder if this is really Earth, because just passing through the gate is already considered another world. While everyone is watching him, they begin to enter the thicket. Inside, all of a sudden, the guy sees Joey holding something. He throws the suitcase to Joey and tells him not to touch any monsters inside the abyss. Just carry the bags and follow them. Joey doesn't understand anything, while that guy thinks Joey spent the night with the Aelin structure. How dare that jerk hit on his goddess? Oh, there will be revenge. But then Joey lowers his head, and the guy starts to get jittery, thinking he doesn't want to carry anything. But suddenly, Joey starts to smile. All right, I won't touch anything. What's the problem? I'll carry everything by myself. The guy is confused, while Joey is there smiling, but thinks he's really safe. The guy just thinks he's not all right. One knee starts screaming for everyone to give him the backpacks. The girl comes closer, saying there's no need to worry after all, she'll take care of it, and he's there confident, just like a normal person, and he has no idea why he's forbidden from hunting monsters, but what's the problem with that? He needs to see how the desperate fight in a dungeon. A few moments later, the fight starts. The guy begins to burn all the monkeys at once. Incredible. Meanwhile, the other one starts to slice several monsters in half. One knee is there, keenly observing. Apparently, the clever crystal weapons absorb the monster's abilities when they kill them in the abyss, and they also manage to gain experience. Basically, it's like a game. The more they kill, the stronger they get, and the faster they level up. The guy with the big sword is already there, taking out all the cockroaches, even the best ones, near his age. It's exhausting with constant fights. That guy has already managed to kill 310 monsters and finally level up Bill. Is Joel really different? But suddenly, out of nowhere, he pulls out a little cloth, puts it on his chest, and starts slicing some pieces of meat and begins to eat. While everyone has to work hard to acquire new skills and become stronger, he just needs to eat. What a lucky guy. Man, he's eating long monkey arms and has also acquired a monkey bite in its snake version, right? He doesn't need to kill any monsters. All he has to do is cook. He just eats a piece of them and gains their traits. He has also acquired the toxin resistance trait. And he also adapted to the jungle, and look, here's another trait. Affinity for sunlight. Oh my, now he's full. Wow, the guy ate so much, just look at the size of his belly. He's even burping. Now, tired from eating so much. The training was tough, right? While he rests, he's already decided. If he joins an extermination squad, he's going straight to logistics. That way way he gets to see others fight, while he gets stronger just by eating. It's an incredible plan. Suddenly, he lets out a shout. Praise be to the god of cockroaches. He hasn't had free time for a long time, and now he can get stronger while everyone else is working hard killing monsters out there. He's there grilling some meat and munching away. The street, everyone stops and stares at that guy thinking, what is that guy doing? They're fighting for their lives, and that guy is just doing one buffet after another. In the silent and dark forest, or not so silent, a huge beast begins to run. That's the heavy-horned beast of the jungle, and it's facing a giant monkey that grunts, ready to confront it head-on. That's the snake-tailed monkey king, but he was no match for that monster. With just one attack, that creature was already down. While Joey is there watching everything hidden, wow, that's the final boss of the abyss, the wild beast of heavy shift, and he looks in shock. After all, that monster was able to defeat the snake-tailed monkey king, who is nearly on the same level as a knight, as if it were nothing, just half a level difference, but the power gap is enormous. But the guy gets closer and says they've already got this, telling everyone to follow his plan. They will be able to defeat that boss. One knee becomes thoughtful, remembering what that girl told him. If he gets hurt, crippled, or worse, because he ignored the rules and recklessly invaded the area, the health plan won't cover it. He remembers that guy he told not to fight the boss, so he's out. The guy grabs his shirt and shouts at him, "Oh, come on, kid, nobody even needs you. Isn't it better to grab the backpacks and stay in the safe zone?" Idiot! The girl back there doesn't say anything, but she looks angry too. They start to hatch a plan with the map while the guys tell him to stay there. He then thanks them and wishes everyone good luck, all leaving from there, while the other two laugh at him. The girl knows that the captain sent that guy. That's the ambush point for the final battle. The guy smiles and says that's exactly it. He has already placed explosives in the 4 backpacks that Joel took. As soon as the boss arrives, he will detonate it. Then they will just move forward and clean up what's left. And all it will cost is a useless companion like that one over there. Damn. The girl got confused after all. It's a suicide mission. She goes into shock and tries to help that guy, but suddenly, the guy places his sword right on her neck and tells her to stop wasting time. He's only going to let this slide once. Then, a little later, Joel is already in the safe zone, still collecting some monster corpses to devour, and suddenly he hears a strange noise. He thinks the fights are so crazy that he can hear them from there, but the noise starts getting louder and closer. Apparently, that thing is coming in his direction, and suddenly a bunch of monkeys come out of there, but they are not attacking Joey. They are passing by him extremely fast. He hides, thinking those creatures ran right past him, and suddenly wood behind him starts breaking, trees falling everywhere. He looks and notices that the boy is right in front of him, running extremely fast. But unfortunately, before he could realize it, he is hit right in the chest. A single blow. That monster didn't stop with that blow. It keeps dragging Joel and breaking several trees in succession, and only stopped when Joel's body hit a gigantic rock in front. Poor Joel, all bloodied. Now he understood that the boss is there, with that enormous boss horn embedded in his chest. While he wondered what that boss was doing there, suddenly Chief God appears, saying that a fatal injury has been detected. While Joel Hyra asks if the whole team was eliminated by that monster, suddenly a flaming arrow appears and lands in the backpack he was carrying. He realizes there are several explosives inside and starts to find it strange to have so many explosives in that backpack. When he comes to the realization that there are explosives there, it's already too late. Everything goes up in the air, exploding everything. Unfortunately, he thinks he has been abandoned again. The guys used him as bait. The explosion is so strong that it burns the entire place, while his so-called allies are watching from a distance. A guy up there begins to smile and asks everyone if they saw his face in the end. Now, they just need to go down and take care of the boss. 2 birds with 1 stone. But suddenly, the girl asks the captain to look closer, and he notices something in the smoke. There he is, Joel. No one understands what is happening. Joel grabs the beast's horn while people say he is still alive. He pulls the horn from the beast out of his body, and his body regenerates completely. With great effort, he begins to say that he really thinks he has died. Suddenly, he grabs the monster with both hands and lifts it up. The captain is in shock, watching that. He throws the beast away towards the captain, saying he won't die that easily. Everything exploded. The captain felt the shock, but came out unscathed. Unfortunately, someone shouted the captain's name, and that was Song Tong, amidst the rubble, pleading for help. The captain shouts and grips his sword. "If you don't want to die, focus on killing the boss." The captain draws his sword while the boy pleads for mercy. The captain, with no mercy at all, activates the flesh-destroying arrows. Suddenly, that guy's body starts to swell and expand completely. But the attack didn't just hit him. It also hit the boss, who began to roar and now stands up, roaring loudly. Now standing, the captain commands everyone to attack that monster. The guy rushes in with a fireball in his hands and throws a fireball at the monster. As the girl unleashes lightning on the monster begins to roar. Receiving those 2 attacks, it screams louder and louder. The girl thinks they are almost at the end, while the captain believes that monster isn't as strong as the legends say. After all, how could that idiot possibly lift the monster as if it it were a rag doll. How strong could he really be? Then he charges towards the monster, shouting for that bastard to die. But the monster realizes he is closing in and manages to channel the magic it was receiving into its horn. Now they're in trouble. She just absorbed all their energy. They must immediately stop using elemental attacks, as the creature has grown even stronger now. The more damage it takes, the stronger it becomes. Damn it. Now he realizes he can't defeat that monster. About 3 of them are trapped, but he thinks of an idea. He grabs one of his subordinates and strikes him right on the neck. Now the guy is unconscious. Now you realize it's Justin. Is he also going to kill this guy? But the captain punches her right in the stomach. Now both are unconscious, and he just says that they were a nuisance before, so dead, they should be more useful. That sly bastard leaves the 2 of them there and runs away, telling them to be grateful. The monster roars and begins to sniff both of them, and now it will make its meal. The monster steps on the first one and crushes him with its paw, and when it goes to step on the second, a knee comes in extremely fast and catches it in the arms. She, waking up, thinks, why did this guy come back to save her? He says that back then she was the only one who didn't intimidate him and who let him carry the backpack because he was weak. In his past life, people treated him like cannon fodder, never thinking twice. Now, as a cockroach, he has become weak again and was forced to lead the way and die for the bigger cockroaches. Unfortunately, he didn't provoke anyone and still was betrayed. In that world, only the strong have the right to control their own destiny, so he needs to get stronger. The other guy is still alive, begging for help, and he screams, being crushed by the paw of that monster, please save me. He remembers the others telling him not to touch any monsters. He looks back and thinks those young people are idiots. And the captain, the guy screams, but is completely crushed by the monster. It seems that our hero there is not so heroic after all. He is so active. The pollen from the sleeping bull, that one, is a type of pollen from the tranquility flower, which causes unconsciousness when inhaled in large quantities. And the girl falls into a deep sleep. He leaves her on the stone while thinking it's better to keep his abilities a secret for now. He looks at the monster and says that now it's just the 2 of us, human to human. The monster looks at him too and apparently agrees, right? And he snaps his fingers saying he will use that monster as a trampoline to gain more power. The boss saves his words and heads towards Joey, but Joey, extremely fast, flicks his tongue at a tree and manages to dodge the monster's attack using his tongue like a whip. Good thing he was able to acquire several abilities along the way, and now it's time to put them all into practice. Now he will activate the mantis scythe, transforming his lower limbs into a type of mantis limbs, capable of slicing prey with ease. Wow, what a crazy guy, so cool. He jumps at the monster now with his mantis arm and tries to pierce the carcass. He hits several times and keeps hitting. It seems that Carcass is really tough. After honing his skill, he can't cut through that boss so easily. Maybe he has a plan. The boss keeps running, and he jumps, thinking that even though the boss has that extremely evolved shell-like armor, he decides to try now on the abdomen. After all, that point is always the weakest. So he strikes right in the monster's belly and, piercing, he jumps. The monster roars in pain and he smiles, thinking he has discovered the monster's weak point. But now the monster looks at him and realizes he doesn't have good intentions. The monster starts to swing its paw, and he spins his whole body with full force, and Joey falls far away. Deep in the dense forest, he hits his back against a rock and starts coughing up blood. That monster is huge and very fast. How will he deal with that monster? Suddenly, the monster begins to charge its horn with lightning and starts to gather even more lightning. Out of nowhere, it releases a power towards Joey. They are screwed now. Joey has no way out. The power hits him squarely, and it continues launching more lightning, electrifying the entire area. And, after the smoke clears, several trees are completely broken from that power. The monster watches and notices some strange arms and a strange skin. Joey seemingly absorbed the wooden skin. It has high resistance to electricity, but is extremely weak to fire. Indeed, as he thought, no matter how strong the monster is, there's always something in his environment that can combat it. Now he has an effective way to block the monster's attacks, but he still needs a finisher. He faces the monster and tells it to fall up. Suddenly, he activates his long arms and grabs the fallen sword far away. The next attack will be the fatal one. He lifts his feet and strikes the ground, activating several roots. Those roots head towards that monster, trying to bind it. Finally, it seems that Joey managed to trap that beast among those vines. The monster roars and tries to break free with increasing strength, but before it can escape, Joey is up there, ready to cut it. But before cutting, he has to let out that famous war cry, sending the monster to hell. But before Joey can finish, the monster manages to free itself. And now it's really bad, Joey. And indeed, that monster broke free purely with brute force. Unfortunately, there's no time to dodge now. He activates his elastic muscles and also increases his muscular strength. The sword clashes against the monster's horn, causing a huge crack, and the sword breaks in half. Now he's in trouble. He throws the sword handle behind him and decides to fight with his hands while the monster is roaring and coming towards him. With tremendous speed and fury, he takes a piece from the monster. Looking at the monster, he apologizes. After all, the fight is over, and he has now acquired a skill that will lead to the monster's defeat. He puts that piece into his mouth and gains the skill Sharp Horn of the Beast with heavy horns, and his body is now imbued with super powerful armor. Wow! He has taken the monster's very own ability. This skin is so cool. Suddenly, he charges at the monster and delivers several blows so fast and so precise that the impact makes it hard for us to see clearly. Moments later, everything is shattered in the vicinity, and there is Joey on top of the completely defeated monster. Joel is victorious, and suddenly, a key appears. The key to the secret realm. If he uses that key within the time limit, it will grant access to the secret realm. He gazes at the key, pondering, what could this be? Meanwhile, people are reporting the accident at the training ground. 3 dead, and 1 severely injured unconscious, with another suffering from minor wounds. The guys are saying to rush the injured to the doctor, and the officer is shouting at Joel to quickly explain what is going on and what happened inside that dungeon, and why he is the only one to come out alive. He is contemplating what to say. Should he say he was lucky or that he escaped because of the monster's horn? No way! That sounds too false to him. Suddenly, someone approaches the officer and starts questioning. Is it just him? Or are the military suspecting that the vice captain's recruit is responsible for the deaths? Is this how they see it? Is he behind this whole disaster? Joel is in shock. An officer begins to deny. Oh, but what is this? That's not what I meant. It's just that all those victims were military recruits selected, so it's natural that investigations take place. The guy looks at Joel, puts a hand on the officer's shoulder, and says that no one expects 0 deaths, and it's good. That's not what he meant, right? No, now our dear Joey. He's dismissed. Joey just stands there watching. After a while, there he is on the terrace thinking, is that guy protecting him on purpose just because he was recommended by his vice captain? He decides it's not worth thinking about such nonsense. What matters now is what the secret kingdom really is. Suddenly, Cheap God appears, saying that the secret kingdom is a hidden dimension inside a dungeon. He can only enter using a hand key. Technically speaking, this is not something normal humans can obtain, but since his DNA is almost identical to that of a dead person, the Abyss classified him as a boss fight, like a territorial battle between monsters, and that's why that key fell. Now he understands that this is almost like a dungeon exclusively for him to become stronger. It is exactly that, but the monsters inside are much deadlier than the ones he has faced so far. Moreover, he will have to deal with the entity that originally gave the key to those horned beasts. Jump. You know that mushroom monster from earlier? Maybe there's one of those intelligent creatures guarding the secrets of the dungeon's core. He then asks, what is that countdown for? Basically, if he doesn't use that key within 24 hours, it will disappear. So he has to hurry. He looks at the key and wonders whether he should go or not. Then he stands up, still in his pajamas, and says, but of course. But before that, he needs to settle one thing first. After all, he might die in there. Sometime later, there he is, begging on his knees for a date with her. But suddenly, she is impressed by his audacity and gives him a kick right in the face with tremendous force. How dare he mess with her? She charges at him mercilessly and yanks his shirt, telling him to say that again if he has the guts. But that guy is bold and says again, please go out with me. But before he can even close his mouth, she throws another right punch straight to his face and keeps hitting him, without mercy, without pity, many times. She hit him so many times that her knuckles started to bleed while telling him to say it again. He's already all scraped up on the ground and says he'll say 1,000,000 times that he's going to have a date with her. She looks down and notices his gaze. Apparently, his look is the same look of regret, trying to fulfill the last wish before dying. Suddenly, she begins to smile. Apparently, that guy has guts. Fine, she accepts his invitation, of course, after beating him up a lot, right? So, later, they're already at a cafe having juice by the beach, and from there, they go to the movies to watch a horror film. He, all scared, starts to hold on to her, and after the movie ends, they go buy some teddy bears, stuffed animals, and take some pictures. Afterwards, they go for a bike ride while he thinks he finally had his first date. Oh boy, he's been planning that for 20 years. Every little detail was perfected, except for one thing. He never had a girl to go out with, and now he can die without regrets. While she's back there watching him, suddenly, she stops and begins to say that she's seen several soldiers die before her. It doesn't matter how many wishes come true, nothing beats staying alive. She doesn't know what happened to that guy in the dungeon, or what goes through his mind, but instead of planning to die without regrets, stay alive. That way, he can actually get the life he wants. Wow, that was a shock for him. He pauses for a moment, lowers his head and thanks, and gets back to pedaling, while she says she hopes that next time he still has the desire and courage to ask her out again. Then later, there he is on the terrace, talking to God. Seriously? All this, and the only thing I wanted was a date. Then, there's the key. Suddenly, he breaks the key, and a portal appears in front of him. He looks at that huge portal, and begins to enter it, thinking that God, seriously, still hasn't understood what that portal meant to him. That's the real way for him to close a chapter of his life. Then, he finishes stepping stepping inside, and there he is again, in a dark and dense forest, completely alone. What madness! And right in front of him, a giant monkey with a snake tail of guardian class, tremendously large. An ancient version of him would have run away, but he has already shown his new skin, which I personally loved. He gains momentum and charges towards that monkey, and the monkey attempts to grab him. The monkey is strong, but Joel is fast and starts to shred the monkey's arm. There he is, right at the monkey's nape, but before he can finish the monster off, the monster turns and grabs his leg. Now it's screwed and throws him away towards a tree. Joel crashes against the tree while the monkey approaches him, mercilessly, and before he could do anything, the monkey has already grabbed him with both hands and tore his body in two. Screwed for Joel. Will he be able to recover? But suddenly he activates his sleep pollen inducer and his limbs start to heal. Now he's as good as new, or almost. Apparently those monkeys are a bit weaker than the heavy horn from the jungle, but there are many of them. If he weren't immortal right now due to his abilities, he would have been done for. Naturally, you can't win against that monster in close combat. Wait a minute. Now he has a plan. Since the environment of the secret realm is similar to the abyss, it means there should also be predators to fight that monkey. Now he remembers that maybe a spider would be perfect, so he starts to disperse more pollen and begins to climb the trees. The monkeys watch, and he is thinking of luring the monkeys into the territory of their predators. He starts jumping from branch to branch with his frog skill, thinking he really has a chance. The monkeys are starting to fall into Joel's trap. He is getting deeper into the forest. Suddenly, one of the monkeys grabs his leg, thinking it has caught Joel, but Joel activates the corrosive muscle and manages to free himself. Suddenly, he spots, there it is, the trap made by spiders. That is the Blood Mother, a danger-level guardian giant hunter. He then activates his new skin. Wow, each one is more beautiful than the last, and the name of that skin is White-tail Partridge. The spider starts to grunt, and he jumps closer, while observing the spiders, thinking that if he disguises himself as a natural predator of the spiders, they won't attack. Fortunately, he absorbed some characteristics from the corpses of the fairies, and they will finally pay off at the right moment. Then suddenly, he notices that several giant monkeys are entangled in the spiders' webs, and the spiders are descending to devour them as they roar. The spiders are eating. They are injecting all the venomous liquid into the skin of that mutant monkey. While he roars, and now weakened by the venom, he is about to be transformed into a beautiful meal for the spiders. While the spiders feast below with their enemies, the monkey, Joey, can only watch. The cobra-tailed monkeys are being dominated by their natural predator. But what strikes him as odd is that those hunting spiders usually hunt by capturing isolated prey, and right now, more monkeys are coming into that area. A whole troop of monkeys has simply invaded enemy territory, but the spiders will not let those guys take over. Now it has turned into a deadly war between monkeys and spiders. While Joey watches, smiling, such chaos is exactly what he needs. He activates the mantis scythe, praises God, and leaps down from that tree toward the monkeys and spiders, starting to tear everything apart. It's monkey, it's spider, every creature down there, while he thinks he continues to attack the rear, leveling the playing field for the weaker side, ensuring that the battle continues. Suddenly, he starts eating some monkeys that are already on the ground to acquire new abilities, while he seizes the opportunity to gain more characteristics. Suddenly, he notices he hasn't gained anything. Not at all. So God Cockroach appears, calling him an idiot. Did he really think his power was that simple? He can't just bite a random monster and think he'll get stronger. No. To acquire stronger traits, he needs to devour specific parts of his enemies. And from now on, that God Cockroach will mark it for him. Then he starts to see that if he bites over there, he will absorb a trait. That trait is located right in the biceps of the giant monkeys. Ah, now he understands. So he went to eat. Strangely, he never mentioned anything about the taste. The only thing that matters to this guy is ability. Now he has obtained the new trait, long arms of the cobra monkey, upgraded from giant arms of cobra monkey. Meanwhile, deep down, the fight continues in a chaotic battlefield like this. He has plenty of time to keep evolving. He keeps acquiring more and more abilities, increasing his stamina, poisonous stinger, paralyzing poison, paralysis resistance, seizing every opportunity that arises, and now, with a horrifying look, all bloodied, he says it's now their turn to clean out that dungeon and starts clearing everything, be it spiders or monkeys. He stresses his opponents faster and stronger, and after a long day, there he is, along with God Cockroach next to a door. Finally, he has access to the final boss room. Apparently, inside, side, there is a giant aura emanating strong and incredible. Then he looks to the side and sees a strange object atop a pile of corpses. What could that be? He gets closer and grabs that ball. Oh my god. Cockroach says that's a twin from the secret realm. That item can only be found in an exclusive monster graveyard from the secret realm, an ultra mega power magic crystal. Rare and, over the years, absorbed residual energy from countless dead monsters and has a huge amount of energy. Now he can absorb that item all at once or use half of the power to open a rift and exit safely from the secret realm. Joel looks at that crystal and thinks, should he face the boss or get out of there alive? Risk everything to gain more power or stay safe? But apparently, that is the best chance he has to evolve, and if he gives up now, who knows if he will have another opportunity like this. Then, he feels confident and walks towards the portal. He has never faced a boss like that before, and also wonders why he isn't running now. After Joey entered the portal, it seems like some kind of hell with a colossal being on a throne. He comes face to face with a beastly man with heavy horns, and the level of danger is hard to identify, but Joey is still confident. Unfortunately, he can't see the level even from far away, but he feels the terrible pressure of that monster. Is that the boss of the secret realms? The monster begins to speak to him. Human, solemn. It was you who massacred my kin. One knee now. He is taken aback. Another monster that can speak? Huh, what? His kin? Does that mean that heavy-horned beast from the abyss was actually related to that monster? Does he have a society like humans do? Suddenly, that monster rises and leaps towards Joey, ready to impale him with his spear. The strike is so strong and powerful that it shatters the ground, turning everything into lava. Wow, what a strong monster. But the monster realizes that Joey managed to dodge and finds all this very strange. But Joey was only able to dodge because he used the skill Giant Arm of Cobra and Monkey. The monster continues to speak, saying that the connection to that world hasn't even been opened yet. How can a human enter? But Joey realizes that the monster is trying to connect that world with the secret realm of Earth. That monster doesn't want to think too much, so he will let Joey speak. He casts a piercing gaze at Joey, and before Joey can notice, he already has the spear stabbed into his chest. The impact is so strong that it drags the knee hundreds of meters, stopping only on a rock and shattering it almost to pieces. He is hurled with such size and strength again against the rock, opening a hole in his chest. But that hole is finally closed by immortal skill while the monster watches. His recovery speed is impressive. Could he be one of us? A monster points his spear and says, maybe Joey will be his experiment. He's going to open him up completely to study him. A monster determined to drive the spear into him again, as Joey activates his dynamic vision, enhanced high-speed target perception. The spear is getting closer in slow motion. As Joey watches, that monster possesses terrifying strength, but his attacks are straightforward. In the following moments, Joey manages to escape that blow. As the monster drives the spear into the ground, Joey is there on the monster's back, thinking that fighting up close will give him the advantage. He then wraps his hand with corrosive slime, thinking of taking some characteristics from that monster. But unfortunately, Joey did not foresee that the monster's tail is extremely strong and managed to strike him. The monster drives his spear into the ground and says that it's a very boring thing to use. He still prefers to punch and crush things. He then jumps towards Joey and begins to punch him with tremendous force and brutality, repeatedly, creating an immense cloud of dust all around. And after finishing, there is Joey impaled into the ground with such brutality, completely gasping for air. Poor Joey is now all broken. Will he manage to survive? The monster observes that he is still alive, while Joey thinks that thanks to his elastic muscles, he managed to absorb most of the damage. The monster then takes his spear and imbues it with hellfire, deciding to finish Joey off. After all, he is getting bored and is now going to deliver the final blow, the knockout punch. But Joey defends that strike using the hardened skin ability and also the dorsal armor resistance of the horned beast. The monster then decides to strike him again. Joey manages to defend against all the blows. He jumps further away and the cheap god appears. While Joey continues to defend himself, it seems that his hardened skin is melting from the flames, but he can still use the secret realm moan to buy some time. Determined not to lose this fight, Joey faces a strong strike from the monster. He dodges and moves behind, finding an opening. He activates the arms of the giant snake monkey, but the monster is smarter. It spins its spear, throwing Joey far away, who crashes into a very strong rock, shattering it into pieces. The monster now begins to gather lava and starts to conjure a spell, a jet of lava explosion, launching all that lava at Joey in one go. Joey can't believe that this monster has such abilities, so he manages to jump away, but that lava is homing in on him again. He uses some trees nearby to try to escape. Unfortunately, one of the lava blasts hits his leg, but unlike regular lava, that lava acts like a bullet and pierces through his thigh. Unfortunately, Joey can't dodge everything, but his recovery ability is activated. However, it seems like it's not working properly because it still causes bleeding and is burning. The monster continues calling him an insolent human, throwing more lava at Joey, saying he will melt him with the flames of hell until he turns into nothing, not even dust. Joey is now surrounded by flames, while shouting that he will take it down with him. He activates his heavy-horned beast trait again and manages to defend against part of the monster's strike. He keeps running, and the monster continues directing all the flames towards Joey. When he gets closer, Joey shouts that he has the monster now. Then, he leaps and manages to land a hit right in the middle of the monster's horn, breaking a part of it, but the monster remains still, not moving at all. Then, Joey realizes that the monster hasn't even budged. The monster grabs his arm and raises his spear, once again imbued with fire, and begins to scorch Joey. Joey is completely consumed by the flames and screams amidst that torment of fire, falling to the ground, charred. A god cockroach appears, speaking kind words, saying that this monster is not the kind of creature that he can defeat with the power he possesses now. Unfortunately, he cannot bear to see Joey throwing his life away, so he begins to activate the power of the secret realm to open the emergency escape portal. But quickly, Joey slaps that crystal and starts to absorb the power, while the god cockroach is in disbelief at what this guy is doing. Joey looks at him and says he made peace with death a long time ago. The god cockroach is astonished as Joey absorbs all the power of that crystal. The power flows through every inch of his body, and he begins to shine, radiating an intense light. Suddenly, there is an explosion, and the monster is left confused about what is happening. What is going on? What colossal power is this? Suddenly, the system warns that he has not escaped certain death. He has passed the second test of the god cockroach, and now his fighter form has been unlocked. He causes a huge explosion across the area. Now I understand why, during a transformation, others do not interfere. It is because of the fear that is happening. Suddenly, we see a hand, and there he is, Joel, completely transformed. He has a chitin body. A new power is emerging from his body. What exactly is this fighter form? The god cockroach says that this fighter form is a state that allows his characteristics to evolve freely. For example, jump. The monster is there, about to strike him. The monster simply says, lava, and suddenly the whole place explodes with overwhelming pressure, turning the area into rubble. And amidst the smoke, there he is, Joey, thinking that armor is formidable, while the god cockroach comments on that guy. He slips like a cockroach through elastic skin, a mutant frog, and the hardened skin of the heavy-horned beast of the jungle. As he gains new traits, he can later continue to refine his skills. In his skin, he observes his body and understands that the flow of lava barely scratched that biological armor, which is solid, completely different from anything he has ever seen. The monster watches the smoke while thinking that no matter what evolution he has undergone now, he would never have survived that hail of lava. And suddenly he sees a punch coming from within the smoke and opens his eyes thinking, what is that? That punch lands squarely on a knee, managing to strike from afar using his elastic muscles. That is the long-range snake monkey point. In that fighter form, he can activate multiple features at the same time and chain them into a combo ability, and there's no cooldown time between feature swaps. Now he has the ability to combine everything into attacks, completely different from what the enemies expect. The cockroach god continues to say that, in fighter form, his resistance and agility increase tenfold. While everyone is feeling incredible, the monster lies fallen, and he is standing. The monster rises, noticing that Joey has not a scratch. Now he is disappointed, unable to believe it. He leaps towards Joey, telling Joey not to underestimate him. Joey gives a glance and activates dynamic vision, elastic muscles, and the mantis blade sickle, a combined combo, and he manages to defend all the monster's attacks with extreme calm. Suddenly, he disarms the monster while it tries to comprehend what is happening. It seems like he is losing. Joey activates a skill in his leg and delivers a beautiful kick to the monster, lifting him up with tremendous force. Now he decides to use his elastic fingers and restrain each limb of that monster in the air, and suddenly, he manages to pull that monster down at a tremendous speed, shattering the ground below. But the monster won't give up so easily. It slams its hand on the ground and screams, "No!" It activates a punch and charges at Joey, trading blows with him, a massive roar echoing throughout the area. Damn, it's over here. Unfortunately, we don't have any more chapters of this story. As soon as we do, if this video performs well, we'll bring the continuation, because curiosity and anticipation are hitting hard. It ended at the best part, man. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for the next video. But that big guy, once so powerful, was now trembling like a green twig in front of our hero. He glanced at his own spear, but it seemed that getting to the boy was going to be difficult. He had a strategy in mind that could delay the entire expansion of the world, that is, high risks. So he planted the spear into the ground, and man, the lava exploded wildly, trying to regain all its power. Joe was shocked to see the lava spreading quickly across the ground. It looked like a voracious snake, and sure enough, the kid found himself surrounded by lava. The atmosphere was tense. The boss monster, all filled with trouble, let out a sinister laugh and said he would regret Taylor being dead because this was his last chance. But Joey, firm and strong, adopted a fighting stance and watched, taking advantage of his skills as a fighter. He visualized the enemy's weak points, the zones, where traits could be extracted, and the stronger the trait, the brighter it shone. It even looked like a carnival. Then, in an instant, Joe disappeared from sight, as if he had never been there. The boss monster, completely confused, began to wonder where the boy had gone, and in the blink of an eye, Joe's foot was already in the beast's face, delivering a kick that looked like a bazooka shot. The monster, completely dazed, slammed into the rocks and let out a scream. "That monster is you!" Joe's movement this time was like a mix between a frog leap and a praying mantis scythe, his exclusive creation. Then he spotted something on the ground, picked it up, and ate it, because, he needed energy. The boss monster, recovering, had regained its power and activated the molten spiral. It was a wave of lava. Capable of reducing anyone to ashes, you could even feel the heat from a distance. He was all pumped up, shouting victory, and unleashed the spinning lava towards Joe. But look, Joe was radiating a golden glow, like a little god of war. The lava drew near, but with a swift movement of his blade, he simply brushed it all away with a smile on his face, leaving the boss monster in disbelief, mouth agape. Joe, in turn, held a spear made from the boss monster's horn, and even remarked that the Yao horn tasted like black pepper sauce, exclaiming, "I love this." The damn boss monster, visibly terrified, cracked a devilish smile, fell on his backside, and began to crawl away, calling for mommy. He described Joe as a monster that devours monsters, and he wasn't wrong. Joe, all confident, asked the boss monster if he could use his last move. The system indicated that the trait Sharp Horn of the Heavy-Horned Beast was updated to Sharp Horn of the Heavy-Horned Man, my friend, and it even gained a melted attribute that was meant to raise the stakes even further. Now Joe's Sharp Horn of the Heavy-Horned Man could be summoned in the form of a spear. What a crazy thing. He then activated the ability Melted Spiral of the Blazing Sky, and the showdown escalated to another level. The boss monster, desperate, pleaded with him not to do it, but the truth was, it didn't stop Joe. The boss monster's scream echoed as the lava engulfed him, leaving nothing of his body to tell the tale. And to top it off, smoke covered everything. You could feel the tension in the air. Joe stood there in the center, when an oblong marble ball with a monster inside appeared. It was almost like a magic show. He became curious and asked what it was, and the god of roaches, in his divine wisdom, informed him it was a monster seal of rarity that only appeared with monsters from the Lord of the Secret Realm class. Then, when he used that thing, it released the monster registration to the, Imperial Iron Guard, allowing him to turn into that crazy monster. Joe, grasping the situation, realized that the little fatty was now incredibly useful. He gave the marble ball a poke. And look, the thing broke suddenly. The screen showed that the fat guy had managed to register the heavy-horned beast. Then they asked him if he wanted to summon the Imperial Iron Guard, and of course he said yes. The fat guy left the screen and began to transform, looking like that boss monster he had seen before. But the fat guy got a bit confused because Joe seemed smaller, Joe in turn was impressed. Look at that, his army of two crazies was getting more powerful. So the fat guy knelt before him and a screen appeared, showing that he was a heavy-horned beast man of the Guardian class. Even the fat guy couldn't believe the transformation. He even had the guts to say he looked ugly. Dude, the cockroach god then said that the change wasn't just in appearance, and that when Joe defeated stronger monsters, the fat guy's power would also increase. But hold on, something broke. It was the pillar behind them, and it was falling on them. The sturdy fat guy gathered his strength and managed to stop the pillar, but couldn't help but cry, because now he was gigantic and couldn't get through the doors anymore. Then, ouch, ouch, he patted him and told him to compose himself. He stated that it was expected for the fat guy to evolve while he was with him, and wanted to see how far this would go. With that, the big guy raised his hand and summoned a spear, going for the attack, the same attack that had thrown him away before. Now it was blocked only with his forearms. Our boy didn't fall behind, and his spear released lava at the moment of impact. Joe came out unscathed, with steam rising from his body, looking like a real monster. He was shocked because not even the boss's flame attacks dealt this kind of damage. Man, the cockroach god seemed to be all proud, saying that the big guy didn't need to expend energy to maintain the secret secret realm. Thus, he had 100% of Lord's power. He also bragged about the strength of the Imperial Iron God, who was really tough. Joe asked the big guy to return, and from there, things were going to get serious. He was radiant because his greatest power, the sharp horn of the heavy-horned beast, had evolved again and now had a lava attribute. Furthermore, the big guy could now transform into a horned beast man and fight for real. He kept this transformation as a trump card, a trick up his sleeve for when things got ugly. After risking his life, the moment to face the selection tournament was approaching. He felt confident, believing that with the attributes he had acquired and a lord from a secret kingdom ready for battle, he would handle any challenge. He was positive he would make it to the extermination team, for sure. 3 days later in the arena, someone entered. There was a crowd inside, and of course, our boy was among them. As the crowd cheered in the stands, he was astonished by the number of people present. There were a lot of spectators as well. It was insane. Our boy overheard a group saying that the selection tournament for the extermination team was the biggest event in the city of Nurai, like the Super Bowl of the scene. It wasn't just about recruiting new members, there was also a political war. Amidst all this mess, this was serious business. Meanwhile, Aelin and Kor were glued to the glass window, like reality show spectators. Aelin mentioned that the most powerful families of the city had each sent a representative to compete. Whoever won would have the clout to assume the presidency for 4 years, controlling the entire city. Then, out of nowhere, some guys in black robes passed by like shadows. Joe even noticed one of them, with a cloth over his eye. It was none other than Beiruz. From the Bai family, the masters of the intelligence department of Nurai, the competitors of the tournament were all elite operatives. In other words, the level of the competition was extremely high. Another frightening candidate was Tony Olaf, representing the army, and he was the favorite to win this year. Aelin had already heard rumors that the army wanted to turn the extermination team into a support department. In other words, they had plans to dominate everything. Then, Bairu and Tony crossed paths, and Tony came on strong, stating that the tournament was crucial for the Olaf family to secure another 4 years in power, and he didn't even need to emphasize the magnitude of the trouble. The neighborhood calmly simply replied that the Bay family would always support the Olafs, just as they always had. Suddenly, the crowd became electrified. An impressive figure entered. It was she, the most holy of the church, the mythical Karen user, making her public debut. Rumors said her ability was like hypnosis or some kind of mind control, and her followers wore blindfolds to avoid looking at her. Near her, a group of strangers seemed more like monsters than people, blindfolded and tied up in bizarre postures. Joe, just by seeing that, sensed something was off in the air, and Aelin realized that for now, the church was giving a boost to these guys. This was because the more distant areas needed their influence to remain stable and were still counting on the research about the Aspers. Even Tony and Barrow were keeping an eye on Karen. Barrow honestly did not expect the church to bring the most holy out of the drawer to compete. Tony, very calmly, said that there was no need to worry about her because she wasn't the target. He pointed to a very short guy in a white robe, saying that the guy with glasses and a uniform was the real focus, the representative of the Johnny family. Johnny J, taking a better look, seemed completely overwhelmed. Tony joked, questioning whether the Johnny family had no one better to send, and if they couldn't have sent a more skilled guy instead of this young master who seemed like a dead weight. He had a sinister aura and arrived, offering a deal. If Jay surrendered now, they would allow the Zhang family an honorary seat in parliament. Jay directly responded that even if they lost the seat, they would never become the watchdogs of this army. Tony, with that smile of someone who has more trump cards than the deck, stated that it didn't matter because soon the city of Nara would have only 3 great families left. When the tension was palpable, Ellen, eavesdropping on the situation, commented that the Zhang family was in control of the Asper Technology Research Institute and were allies of the extermination team. She also noticed that Jay was the weakest of the 4 representatives and that the army would do everything possible to take the place of the Zhang family and increase influence in the parliament. She notified Joe through the microphone that the captain was hoping the kid would do well in the tournament. My brother was supposed to have a chance to protect the Zhang family. The guys were heavily involved in the trouble. Joe, in a brave move, replied that he would do his best, like a hero in a movie. Can you believe it? The girl took off her headphones and asked the commander if he really believed in Joe's potential. Hey man, the tension in the air was palpable. Deep down, she read the situation because she knew that if the army took control of the parliament, they would be in a serious mess, you know? The commander, already full of himself, commented that the kid had already saved the AI and come back alive from the abyss, implying that he actually had some skills. Fireworks popped in the sky as if it were New Year's Eve, and the crowd simply erupted in cheers. They watched the center of the arena where vines danced across the ground and a flower bloomed, revealing none other than Haley Carmen. She welcomed everyone and introduced herself as the examiner for round 1. With an air of someone who knows what's up, she explained that the tournament would be divided into 3 evaluation rounds like a bloodbath. The first round was called Extreme Climbing. What a name, right? Behind her was a mountainous path path with 100 stone steps. Reaching the 10th step already meant those guys had made it. But from what everyone knew, the two that were considered examined would be out in the climbing. The jaws of the examined dropped, like no one had any idea what to expect. Haley assured them that Team 10 of the extermination squad would do everything to protect them, but still, safety was the priority, you know? She then announced the start of the first round of the exam, and the mood intensified even more. A lot of people hesitated before moving, freezing in place, but then a brave guy forced himself to continue, shouting that climbing wasn't that hard. The others, seeing that courage, decided to stick together and raced forward like a treasure hunt. Among those who didn't rush were Karen, Zay, Tony, and a few others. Tony, with his more critical demeanor, commented on the others being fools for running without even thinking about what they were going to face. And the crazy guy in front even mocked the elites of the four families, calling them little puppies. Trembling, he declared he was going to be the winner of the round and continued climbing as if he were on a walk in the park. But then, the atmosphere began to change and he was like, "What the hell is this?" They were transported to a city and the confusion ran rampant. But in reality, they were still on the steps, frozen like statues. Joe, always curious, asked why they were paralyzed like that. He, catching on, knew that the test wasn't just to climb the 100 steps. They were made of the bones of a Class King spectral monster, a sinister creature that had made many people cry. But now, they were bones. And even in bone form, this creature managed to trap the unwary in illusions, like a nightmare. If they couldn't escape this mess, soon they would see monsters devouring them, and that's how they'd find death. Haley, being the master she is, announced that this crew was eliminated and used the resurrection halo on them, in case anyone was interested. Joe froze, all surprised to see those players were all dead, looking like a scene from a horror movie. He, in his explanatory way, put the headset back on and said that each illusion had its own objective: survive until a timer runs out, reach a specific place, or defeat a specific monster. And to escape the illusion, one simply had to fulfill the condition. Otherwise, it was game over. She then said she couldn't contact him inside the illusion, so the boy would have to trust his own instincts. Then, our boy Tony told the crew to remember the mission to be the ones who climbed the highest. That's right, kids. Then, synchronized as if they had rehearsed, they all stepped on the first step. Tony focused intently and prepared for the fight. With a snap of his fingers, the creature was transported to a blazing mountain, and to raise the tension, a timer appeared, and suddenly the flames twisted and tada, a dragon emerged from the fire. Tony realized right away that the illusion was created just to test his skills, but he didn't care because the job was to hold the fort for 5 minutes. The team was with him and decided to stick to plan 1 because, you know, planning is everything. The guys unleashed water from their hands like elite firefighters, while the others played their part. Tony stood there frozen, then decided to snap his fingers in a kind of come here style. In the blink of an eye, a block of ice burst from the ground and pierced the dragon, making it dissipate like smoke. With that, the military team was able to move forward without looking back. The Corps was impressed. He noticed there was no resistance and thought his subordinates had already awakened. He indicated that the army was really going all in to win. This year was all or nothing, brother. Aelin, on the side, wondered how the commander remained so calm, like mercy. He tried to reassure her by saying she didn't need to get nervous, but also mentioned that the first 10 steps were just to filter out the newbies who lacked potential. So, for the elite candidates, that was just an appetizer. But the higher they climbed, the more complicated the illusion became. Get it? Eventually, they would run out of subordinates to sacrifice, and then, kid, the real trouble would begin. He stated that to reach the peak, they either needed to unleash a technique that defeated 100 adversaries, or have the calm of a Buddhist monk in the face of anything. The quick audience noticed there was still someone at the starting zone, and began to wonder if he had given up. They were talking about Joe, that guy who's impossible to understand. He opened his eyes as if startled and started to climb the stairs. And of course, the first illusion appeared right afterward, but the poor guy was sliding down a slippery cliff and was falling like crazy. But then, in a surge of determination, he pulled out the spear and drove it into the side of the cliff, halting his nasty fall. At that moment, he felt something. A blue bird with a gigantic beak appeared out of nowhere. He was in a real bind, as he was on a cliff with no friction, and it was impossible to stay standing. And of course, a flying monster decided to attack the boy from above. Joe, now pumped up, made the system screen appear and clicked on attack, then on poisonous sting, and even sent out a sticky tongue. Because he was full try hard, with that whole combination he got a whip full of thorns, and things got serious. He absorbed the bird's lightning that started to glow blue, and the attack was reflected back, injuring the bird, which began to descend towards the cliff. He found it all so easy that he kept climbing calmly, as if he was going to get an ice cream. He thought about how those illusory monsters seemed intimidating, but their strengths were akin to jungle Eskimos. Silent shade, man. He remembered Aylin's intel that had said that near the peak, the monsters were of the Guardian class. He was super confident that, at the level he was now, he would be able to handle them. But right off the bat, that, he took another step, and guess what? The illusion started over. Man, this time it turned into a maze. You know, these crazy illusions are always the most complicated. A floor that you can't predict even with a crystal ball. If someone bumps into the enemy that returns their stuff, my brother, they will end up trapped like a rat in cheese. But seriously, that didn't scare our hero, because he unleashed the lava spear ability, burning everything and opening a path. And guess what? He soon found the exit. The kid was feeling great, knowing that his skills shaped better than clay. So, he charged ahead without fear. The guy next to him climbed 2 steps and thought he was showing off just because he started last, as if he were the protagonist of the thing. He shot up again, like a rocket, with a speed that left everyone jaw-dropped. The guys he passed were left speechless, wondering how that was fair. Like, what the hell is this? One person even shouted that he was a real beast in this deal, and another dude even begged Joe to take him along, even though he had just called Joe a show-off. What irony, right? The other guys there didn't let it slide and shot him a death glare, as if they wanted him to disappear. They took all their anger out on the poor guy for saying that, thinking they had now lost the chance to be pulled into this feat. The core revealed that Joe was faster than he imagined, and to that pair, I don't know. The crazy guy might actually reach the top of the mountain. Elin was worried because she saw the kid as an outdated rookie not long ago, and now he was aiming for levels that even the commander hadn't reached. So, under that blue sky, the 4 from the elite companies were leading like a quartet of superheroes. He announced that the Lightning had finished the round with 38 steps. Like, feeling herself, Karen went for 35 steps, and the highest score so far was Tony's 40 steps, who was the ninja of the bunch. Tony looked back and saw Jay dragging himself, breathless, looking like he had run a marathon. He was feeling down because his subordinates had already danced out of the competition, and now he was in a one-man race. Tony, the strategist, had timed their entry into the illusion to sync with his and ambushed them like it was a magic trick. He was feeling bad because he only reached 31 steps and kept thinking about his family's expectations, which were like 9 steps above. He started questioning if this was how it all would end, in an epic defeat. They called him, and Tony ordered him to bark like a dog 10 times and then leave, that his family would still remain on the throne of power. He went for the game and offered the chance to make just one sacrifice. She was crumbling, crying while biting her lip until she heard something, and out of nowhere, Joe appeared, like in an emergency elevator. Bang! This caught Tony by surprise, especially because Joe was solo, without subordinates, while the gang relied on various pieces for sacrifice. He asked who that guy was, shocked, not knowing if this was an illusion or reality, and so Joe continued to rise as if nothing was happening. He was stunned by his strength, like, wow, what is this? And thought that if they knew someone like that in the town of Nire, I was begging him to represent them instead of wasting time with mediocrity. On the other hand, Aelin asked him to help Jay, but our boy was so focused that he moved on without looking back. This left her wondering if he wasn't really listening to her, and man, the situation was radical. How far is this trouble going to go? One of Tony's subordinates was stunned like, dude, wow. And of course, that earned him a scolding from Tony himself, because the Olaf family had spent a fortune, so training the crew and maintaining their standing in situations like that. Tony ordered the guys to follow him as he went up a few more floors. The guy was aiming to break the family's 50 steps record. Eventually, the last pair of subordinates dropped out, saying, so tired. He knew he was being a bit reckless, but soon enough the dude was moving fast. Then he wondered where that kid had gone, right? And to his surprise, Joe was right behind him, following the mission's father. The shock made Tony's face look really weird, as if he had received an electric shock. Joe passed by him and remarked that second place was all Tony's. Wow, what a tease, huh? That made Tony more irritated than a kid without candy. Joe turned around and asked why the dude had stopped chasing him. He mocked Tony, saying that a real man doesn't give up so easily. Like, my friend, what a slap in the face! Tony's anger skyrocketed more than a rocket. The tension couldn't be higher. At noon, Haley shouted that Joe was now in the lead with 60 steps. Dude, what is this? Then the kid hit 82 steps. Alright, at that point, he had 99 steps, tied with the commander's highest record. Almost there, brother. One more and he would reach the top. But boy, the pressure was on. The crowd was in a frenzy because they were about to witness a historic moment. At the same time, everyone was wondering who that kid was. An examiner yelled that he had lost, and that just pumped up the crowd even more. The casino boss recognized Joe. He remembered when Joe bet all his organs on himself and saw the boy's progress. He knew he was going to screw up. Before securing the last step, Joe had the audacity to say something. He arrogantly asked if that was it. Like, dude, what a nerve. Then, all of a sudden, he heard a static noise in his earpiece. What the hell? He shouted for him to stop showing off. And, as everyone knew, the grumpy one was right. She was mad because she had told him to help Joe, and he completely ignored her. She said that with just one round, he already thought he was the king of the hill. But he replied that he was going to complete the mission as promised. Quite the confidence, huh? He moved, but started to descend. And that's when everyone was like, huh? Everyone was confused, wondering what he was doing when he should be heading heading back on a safe path to avoid more illusions. Tony saw Joe approaching and not missing a chance. The kid taunted him, asking why he hadn't hit 50 degrees yet. Step by step, Tony got extremely annoyed. It seemed like Joe had come back just to humiliate the guy. He stopped right in front of Jay, applying pressure to the situation. He positioned himself above him like total dominance. Jay was completely baffled, not understanding what was going on. Joe picked up the kid, and to everyone's surprise, he was carried on Joe's shoulder like a trophy. Tony Philo was in total shock seeing Joe drag a dead weight up. Like, are you crazy? On top of that, the dude was in an illusion meant for two, and there he was, alone, in the mix. In the blink of an eye, the illusion started rolling and the lava began to fill everything around them. It looked like a horror movie. They would have burned, but thankfully Joe put up a barrier. Foot on the gas, after that scare, or rather, a tralala, they got through it and saw another illusion emerge. This time they were fighting some monsters in the forest, a real mess, and Joe was there, tanking the situation and carrying Jay, who looked like a branch hanging. The next illusion that exploded was in the sea. Beasts and sea monsters tried to devour them. Joe turned into a bird, as if that was normal, and Dis clung to him to avoid becoming monster lunch. She was thinking about how to pull her weight, like, how can I help and not be a burden? But bizarrely, Joe was so quick that before she understood what was happening, he was already flying. Then it hit her, and she realized that the best thing to do was to stay quiet and hold on like an accessory. When they landed, the sun was already high, and it seemed like they had just come back from a marathon. At this point, G was already breathless. He had hit 50 degrees like super tired. Joe, in high spirits, said that as long as he was one step above Tony, he would be fine. G was, there, almost crying and bowing to him, incredibly grateful. He declared that from now on, he was a benefactor of the Zhang family, like, here to add value. Then Tony, thinking he was all that, shouted at him as if to say, wow, what a loser. And Joe honestly noticed that Tony was completely furious. He asked if Joe thought he knew what he was doing, like, hey kid. Then he played the big boss and asked if he really wanted to ruin the Olaf family's plan, which they had spent 4 years strategizing. He tried to threaten Joe, saying that if he messed with the Olaf family, he'd be done for. But our protagonist honestly didn't care at all. He remembered the mess Justine had made and how the military officer accused him. This made him think that those people were so used to being tyrants that they believed everyone would bow down. He wondered how they weren't making a ton of enemies along the way. Giving in to a little fun, he called Zai over and asked if he wanted to punch out his anger. Soon, Zai got all excited like, can we add this to the reward? Then Joe, without thinking twice, sprang into action. Tony was shocked. In the blink of an eye, Joe punched Tony in the face. Tony went flying and lost a tooth. What a situation. Meanwhile, he thought how the extermination commander would never dare to challenge them face to face. He wondered who the hell Joe thought he was to start throwing punches. And to top it off, he even fell to the bottom of the stairs. What a scene. It was a dramatic moment, but who said he would stop there? Man, everyone watched the scene on a big screen and saw our hero hit the ground like a sack of potatoes. Then, suddenly, the guy who was sitting on the couch stood up like a spring toy. He sent Genting to run and get a complete report on Joe by that night because things were getting serious. Genting, the boss of the city's intelligence office in Nihari and patriarch of the Bay family, responded that he got the message. The situation was tense because Chairman Rodas Olaf barged in and made it clear, no matter who you are, if you mess with them, you're going to pay dearly. Rodas is the head of the parliament of Nihari and also the leader of the Olaf family, so the kid knows what he's talking about. Meanwhile, as night fell, our hero Joe finally returned home and decided it was time to take a break. He settled on the couch with his legs up on the coffee table and devoured some fries. The first round of the selection tournament had ended 2 days ago and everyone was shocked. Tony, who was the favorite, ended up in 3rd place. Joe even admitted the guy did well because after being thrown off the mountain, he climbed back up and crashed into the stairs. The dude went and smashed himself on. The 49th step before the match started, a real drama. And get this, Joe bet all the magical crystals he had brought from the abyss, as well as a part of his body, and ended up winning a hefty sum with odds of 10 to 1. The little boss of the casino practically thanked Joe for saving his life because the fight had been real. The guy had to part with everything he had to gather the promised 50 gold coins. In this crazy world, a gold coin is worth about 100,000 units, and that's before the catastrophe. Elian mentioned that was roughly what she earned in a year hunting monsters. Think about the money. So like, Joe ended up making a fortune while thinking about the reward for helping the young master of the Zhang family. He was interrupted by a noise at the door. He was stunned, unable to believe what was happening, and Elin simply kicked the door down. For the love of God, he was in trouble. Immediately, our hero got up and greeted her, because that's what you do. She couldn't understand why he turned down a 3-story villa from the John family just to stay in a broken down pad. She even asked him if he had any bread. With the egg on his head, he was shocked and argued that it was near the extermination team's tower, so it was safer, you know? By the way, Aylin's house is inside the extermination team's tower, so it's close. She told him not to waste money because every little coin has to be used to get stronger. She mentioned that there was going to be an auction that night and said he should go to open his mind a bit, and of course he accepted the invitation, right? When night fell, they walked through the streets. Along the way, Joe was paying attention to what was happening around him until suddenly a rat squeaked and he jumped as if he had seen a ghost. He couldn't believe the auction was happening in such a creepy place, like someone watching a horror movie. In the midst of his doubts, he asked if this was legal, and Aylin, with that knowing look, replied that the workers selling there weren't authorized to be in the public market, but it was booming. That's why they call it the black market. Joe was shocked. He knew it was illegal, but he didn't think it was like this. And to make matters worse, he wasn't doing anything to stop this scene. In fact, she was just hanging out at the party. It was one of those creepy nights, well past late. So he decided to take a chance and went to the back door, knocking 3 times and waiting. The door opened. What a surprise, huh? She told Joe to stay close to her, like, "Come here, kid." They went in, and it was supposed to be all calm. But suddenly, boom! The door shut and the lights turned on like it was a Blackpink concert. Joe was blinded for a moment, and when he could see, he was surrounded by a bunch of guys in black robes pointing guns at them. It was done for, kid. They were trapped, with no way out. Then one of the guys took off his hood and, with a mean face, demanded their invitation. Aylin, calm and serene, handed over the invitation like she was giving a business card. The guy looked at it like he was checking to see if the apple was rotten and told them to move along. Cut to them entering another door, and lo and behold, they were in the auction hall. The scene was packed with people, a real crowd. Joe was impressed. Dude, there were tons of people. He turned to Aylin full of doubts and asked if the place was legit. She bluntly replied that with the Bay family's money, even if it wasn't, everyone would think it was. Because, dude, ordinary people don't even get in. Only fancy stuff. On the second floor, the Olaf family's private room is there, all fortified. And who's on the sofa looking like he's got trouble written all over him? Hart, the Olaf family's agent. One of Hart's goons spotted something suspicious and wasted no time. He went to inform the boss. He said that Ellen, the exterminator, was in chair 17, along with Y. Hart. Noticing this, gave that wicked smile and commented that indeed the world is small, you know? Moments later, the host shows up, and guess what? He's dressed as a sexy bunny, all stylish, and he says that that night there were over 100 rare treasures, making their visit more than valuable. The first item on the agenda, a mermaid's tail, a rare item that humans can eat and according to rumors, has anti-aging effects. Those in the know realize it's harder to get than winning the lottery. The competition began with a gold coin, which left the crowd on edge. Like, where's the fight? They really went for it by bringing a premium item. That thing was so rare it could even save Grandma from the stage, from the audience. And then the Godbug commented that the rating of the tail was F, meaning terrible. The dude was completely lost, wondering why everyone was arguing over that junk. Ellen, impatient, told him to wake up. After all, it prolonged life, and he was the only one who hadn't realized it yet. The next items were all those that nobody bought at past auctions. Really cheap, starting from 100 copper coins. The audience knew they were being played because that stuff was just trash. These guys knew that not every monster carcass was worth it, and were just there to troll the lost newbie, our hero. The Godbug began to analyze the carcasses scattered around the room and did a quick assessment, noting that the ratings of the creatures were at least curious. Then Joy, a crazy kid, without hesitating, with a smile on her face, she raised her hand shouting that she wanted all those corpses. Of course, the auctioneer was thrilled, thinking, look at that, I found some fools willing to waste money for nothing tonight. Hay, for her part, had just proved that she was, at the very least, a bit foolish. Now, the next item of the night was undoubtedly one of the most anticipated, a magical crystal from the frozen plateau of the abyss of rank from the sea, which, by the way, belonged to a spider called Ice Fang. The auctioneer began to proclaim that the item had over 50% purity, was top-notch, and was perfect for anyone wanting to play with an ice-type alarm clock. Bids started at a measly gold coin. Aylin, the determined girl, already had in mind that she needed that, especially after the tragic encounter with the evolved mushroom monster. She knew that as soon as her snowfang blades absorbed the ice's infinity, she would become so powerful that she would be a true combat machine, and she didn't want to feel shame any longer. Then, Aylin raised her number in the air. The auctioneer recognized her and asked if there were more bids. At that moment, someone pressed a button and announced that seat 1 had bid 10 gold coins, and that bid came from the VIPs up on the second floor. The auctioneer warned that now each increase had to be at least a gold coin. Hart, who was just chilling there, had already figured out which item Aylin was aiming for, and realized that it was exactly what young Master Tony wanted. And then, Aylin shot them a deadly glare. After the Olaf family started bidding, things got really weird. She offered 11 gold coins. Seat 1 went and bid 15, but our heroine was unfazed and raised it to 20 gold coins, only for seat 1 to respond with 25 gold coins. People thought she was practically crazy for wanting to bid against the Olaf family. Indeed, everyone there had already recognized her. Joe, the Eye, protagonist's best friend, knew this feud wasn't going to end well. Hart, for his part, was sure that Island didn't have any money to spare, as she was just a vice captain. I bet her limit was 30 gold coins. Indignant, Aelin decided to offer 30 gold. The auctioneer, super excited, saw that the bidding war was heating up and asked if the jewel would stay with Chair 17. She was already putting all her savings on the table, so she was crossing her fingers for it to work out. The auctioneer nearly had a fit when Chair 17 shot up with a bid of 35 gold, and the audience practically dropped their jaws. Aelin, clearly devastated, could hardly believe what was happening. One of Hart's goons approached her to deliver a message from the boss. With a very sarcastic expression, he said, "Too bad you're broke. If you can't pay, man, don't even show up here. This place isn't for those who are financially strapped." Hart simply laughed and imagined what the reactions of the crowd would be after hearing that. The auctioneer announced that this was the last call for the bid. Joe, having nothing left to lose, took Aelin's number from her hand, stood up, and offered 50 gold. The audience was shocked, and Aelin glared furiously. Hart found that at least amusing and commented that in all the years he had worked as an agent for Olaf, he had never seen anyone so bold as to even outbid until the end. Man, the kid pressed the button and decided to raise his offer to 55 gold. You know, things started to heat up, and the bids were climbing like boiling water. Now, Lot 1 has 80 gold coins, and the tension is rising. Then Joe, the smart guy, made a bid of 90, but Helen quickly warned him that they couldn't go any higher. No way, kid. Joe had it all planned out, knowing that the jewel cost at least 20, so he was calculating in his head. Man, he reassured Helen by telling her not to panic and to focus on securing the item first. Got it? If there was any problem, he'd talk to Z. It would be smooth. Z, the guy, was doing his thing and stated that he was right, just a matter of a few coins, and he even showed up saying not to worry because he would cover what was missing. You understanding? Hart's subordinate came with the news that they could no longer bid. They had already blown the family budget. Dude, Joe, in a provocative style, showed the middle finger and made a face like, if you can't play, don't show up. Hart looked like he bit into a lemon when the auction ended. Helen, being nice, thanked everyone for the night with that cheeky smile and promised Joe she would pay what she owed little by little. But who believes that, right? Then he said, without too much formality, that every coin needed to be invested to get stronger. It's the famous focus on the game. He reminded her that he followed her advice to the end, making the game worth it. Suddenly, the ground began to shake and everyone looked like they had seen a ghost. Angelica didn't waste any time and asked what was happening, kind of in shock. Aileen received an emergency message. Everyone had to respond to the disaster level at the fortress, and outside, the sky was filled with birds flying. It looked like a scene from a horror movie. Then a colossal creature emerged from the ground, like a giant caterpillar, and it was spine-chilling. The monster had a huge mouth full of sharp teeth. When one foot of that giant beast touched the ground, it released an energy that made the earth tremble. Zai, completely lost, asked what was going on. Elin had already received the call and was ordered to gather the patrol teams and take the civilians to the nearest shelters. She was about to say more, but Joe jumped in and said there was no need to say anything because in times of struggle, everyone is in the fight. He was pumped up to mobilize and face whatever came. She was in on it too, told them to follow, and that frantic run began. Some parts of the city were on fire and the situation got tense. Dude, a drone was yelling at the civilians to run to the shelter, or else it would be trouble. Then the crowd panicked and started running like there was no tomorrow. A thunderous roar made everyone stop for a second, and everyone looked horrified. Then a woman, without thinking much, pointed to the sky like, "Look at that!" Imagine the scene. Dude, a bunch of giant insects buzzing through the air, and one of them, out of nowhere, crashed to the ground. Man, it cleared the crowd, crushing some people, obviously sending everyone into total panic. Running like hell had broken loose, like damn. In the midst of all this, there was a little girl there, crying and calling for her mother. The scene was heart-wrenching, but look at that. Miracle of miracles. Her mother managed to find the little one. Meanwhile, giant objects were falling from the sky just to help everyone hurt more. The monsters that appeared looked like cursed spiders, with spiky shells and a noise like a little rat with colic. And what did those creatures do? They attacked. On the spot, making people bleed while devouring everything. It was a real frenzy, killing one after the other, without mercy or pity. Then the mother, with the child in her arms, tried to escape, but guess what? A monster right in front of her. The poor thing froze when she saw the danger coming. She simply closed her eyes, expecting the worst, an endless despair. But look, our hero Joe appeared like a true savior. He sliced the creature in half like a warrior's sword, unleashed the flames from his arms, and destroyed the monster with bravery. The mother who witnessed it was speechless. Like, what an incredible moment. She had just enough time to thank him with a trembling voice. Joe, always alert, realized that the chaos wasn't over. Meanwhile, Eli was there, holding two men by their collars. The guy was huffing laughing, not believing that the right ones were standing still while everyone else was getting beaten up. Ellen issued a warning calling the team to defend the city right away, but the brown-haired guy already showed up with the excuse of, "I'm just here for my money." He declared he wasn't going to put his life on the line for anything in this world, and the other, mocking, said it was a team problem and they should sort it out. Then the brown-haired guy came up to Joe and, with sarcasm, threw some jabs. Soon, Aline, full of ideas, unleashed her web and knocked the guy down. The dude was all lost, asking what she was doing. Without wasting time, she put her foot on the guy's cheek and laid it down straight, stressing that this wasn't a conversation but a summons, clear as day, and she told him to take the guy away like, that's it, he deserted. And the guy, thinking too highly of himself, shouted, not seeming to care that the world was ending. He went wild, claiming to be an Olympic athlete, and said he wasn't even in the extermination squad. Like, give me a break, right? Our friend Joe saw that the city was a mess, full of monsters and chaos, but still didn't lose focus. Elin received one of those missions to lend a hand at the Red Gate, and she wasn't messing around. At the Red Gate, things heated up with a loud explosion that made the ground shake. She wasted no time and called Joe to join her in this mess. They both hopped on a motorcycle, and when they arrived at the gate, another insane explosion happened. The monsters began to invade as if there were no tomorrow. She asserted that they couldn't wait for reinforcements. The situation was critical, and they had to act quickly. Then she stopped the bike and, using her web silk, went through the door holding Joe like a pack of cookies. Upon reaching the top of the wall, the sight was terrifying. Numerous bodies, both human and monster, lying on the ground. Joe, frustrated, thought they had arrived too late for the action. He saw a legion of monsters on the other side of the wall and asked if it was just the two of them against all that madness. Helen stood there contemplating and suddenly spotted a cannon, that glimmer of hope that appears at the end of the tunnel. She said if the cannon still worked, it was possible to hold the line. You know, plan B. She asked him to hold the monsters for 2 minutes. It was as if she had placed a burden on his back. At that moment, the giant monsters appeared, looking like they had stepped out of a nightmare. Joe was anxious, all alone in the midst of that chaos, and for 2 minutes, there was no way to turn back. He pulled out the cockroach scythe and took out a whole bunch of monsters in one go. It was almost a show. He saw a monster crawling, used the sticky tongue, and flung the miserable creature away, with no mercy. He yelled that none of them would get past him. That was the kind of attitude we respect. A huge monster roared again, grabbing his attention. In the blink of an eye, Joe was already glued to that beast, like a disaster magnet. He called for the spear, and in one swift motion, he sliced the monster in half, but the boy was already out of breath, like someone who just ran a marathon. Then another monster loomed over him, as if it wanted to use Joe as a snack. He stopped to think and understood why people didn't dare to face these troubles. Just one slip and death was right there. He looked at the human body beside him, the melted skin revealing muscles and teeth. Joe, who seemed determined, wasn't going to give up that easily. He stared at the monster, jumped to, dodge, and stabbed the beast from above. A true acrobat. In his mind, being afraid couldn't be an excuse to run away. Man, that's the spirit. He took a piece of the monster's flesh and, in a crazy decision, ate it. Delicious. And with that, he activated the dragon's claw ability. Things got serious. His arms transformed, and he was ready to face the charging monsters. A quick attack hit the ground, sending dust flying with the tense atmosphere in the air. Meanwhile, in the background, from the Red Gate, a monster was crawling, carrying its egg, like a scene from a horror movie. That creepy egg was full of little monster hatchlings. Just imagine the scene, man. Then, quickly, he tossed the egg up, and when it hit the ground, it exploded, releasing all those monster kids. At that moment, our hero was already at the brink of exhaustion. Man, he didn't have enough strength left to scratch his head. If things kept going like this, he knew those monsters would keep coming, like a flood of trouble. He even wondered where the reinforcements that should have arrived in 2 minutes were, but he also realized that if he lost the wall, the city would go to hell, and more people would get hurt. That thought gave him the strength to carry on, you know? He swore that from the moment he stepped on that wall, retreating was not an option. It was kick down the door or nothing. Then he stood up and unleashed a fire in his hands, showing that things were about to heat up. A horde of monsters was already coming his way, and he had no way back. He unleashed more flames, enveloping his spear in a move that looked like it was choreographed for a movie. The skill he used was called Melting Spiral of the Fiery Sky, and my friend, it burned a good number of monsters at once. The fire continued to burn and night had fallen, right in the apocalypse vibe, at the center of the chaos in the city's control room. One guy was losing his patience because no defense systems had been activated, and the main crystal seemed to be on vacation. He ordered the sequence to be activated again. Come on, guys! Things were heating up, and the situation was complicated. The sequence was running, but the crystal was unresponsive. It was total despair. Then, someone offered to solve the problem, but the crowd was like, who is this guy? They recognized it was a rookie, and everyone knew he was the G who had developed the defense system with his clan. They acknowledged that, honestly, no one understood the system better than him. Two monstrous-looking arms emerged from his back, and while two arms were busy typing, the others moved as if they had a life of their own. Then he figured out that the crystal's loop was functioning and the energy amplifiers were back online. And, look, the threat detection signals were within normal range. Damn, the crystal is in good condition, he thought, not understanding how he was typing so fast. But just when that realization hit him, the power flickered. This meant someone had managed to use the emergency overload to cut all the power to the system. It was a total blackout. Everything shut down, and the situation turned into chaos. He was sure that the shutdown command wasn't even used during regular maintenance. This gave him an idea. Someone had sabotaged the city's defenses on purpose. What madness. He couldn't believe what was happening. It felt like they were handing the city over on a silver platter to the creatures. So, he ordered to restart the city's defense weapons and continued to type like crazy. The crystals began to glow and bam, the cannons started firing like fireworks. The crowd cheered as they saw the systems returning to normal. It was time for celebration, but he remained focused on his mission, like a true nerd who wouldn't let go of the keyboard. He watched the people being rescued and felt relieved. Thanking for having an extermination squad always preparing for disasters, meanwhile the church was in total chaos, overseeing the evacuation and providing some slick medical support. Meanwhile, the intelligence office was trying to maintain order in the city, which was looking like a war zone. The guys were directing civilians on where to go, but the military, at first, thought it was better to let the extermination squad handle it on their own, like to tire the guys out during the monster invasion. But things got so bad that the whole city was about to collapse. Then, since there was no other way, they were forced to roll up their sleeves and intervene in the situation. I mean, our hero thought that if he had immobilized the crowd earlier, even with the system sabotaged, the damage wouldn't have been so great. He knows it's still not over. Even with the defense being rebooted, the remaining turret had to hold the line at all costs. Otherwise, my friend, it was the end of the line. If the wall fell, buddy, the city would go under. Meanwhile, Joe was already like the old man with the sack, panting and barely able to stand. The dude had already killed a ton of monsters, but it seemed like they wouldn't give him a break. They wouldn't even let him breathe. It was attack after attack, you know what I'm saying? Then, after that last spiral from hell, the dude couldn't shoot anything for a while. He yelled at Aylin asking if she hadn't finished that crap yet. At that point, Joy faced a huge creature that looked like it came out of a horror movie. The monster's body was long, filled with legs, and its mouth was gigantic, full of sharp teeth like a nightmare menu. Joe looked like a zombie, but still charged at the creature. The dude pierced the monster's mouth with his spear and man, there was a huge explosion. He quickly backed off and checked if the cannon was still working. He said he needed just 2 minutes, but those 2 minutes turned into 4, and Joe was already almost 10 minutes into the fight. Honestly, he yelled again, asking if she was done yet. The monster, thinking it was going to strike, saw the cannon and moved so fast that Joe was like, "Dude, what the hell is this?" He went into full alert, throwing himself onto the monster's back, kind of climbing onto it. Meanwhile, he gripped the spear tightly and tried to pierce the monster, but the thing kept moving forward and he couldn't stop it. But then, look at that. The cannon fired and hit the monster right in the face. Joe stood watching and asked if it was over now. He got up and said it had taken longer than he thought, but at least the crystal had been restored, so all good. The cannons continued firing, and it was a shower of monsters getting their faces smashed. What a delight. Then Joe spotted some guys marching, and wouldn't you know it? His team was arriving. Aylin was thrilled because now they were in the right position. She ordered the crew to hold the line until the wall towers were back online. It was now or never, and everyone replied with a yes. However, under pressure, they didn't know that some small monsters were eyeing the wall and were already leaping towards them. Then the extermination squad fired and managed to hit some monsters, still shooting non-stop. But, unfortunately, one of the monsters fell on a soldier and devoured the guy. The dude who saw that fired at the creature and told his buddy to get up. But man, to his surprise, the monster appeared out of nowhere, grabbed his neck, and bam, he fell too. The other men kept firing without looking back. They moved forward, even with tears streaming down their faces, because this is war, man. The battlefield was utter chaos, monsters being hit from all sides, and the fight was raging. One soldier, with rage in his veins, screamed like a madman, while another begged for help. The noise of the monsters was a symphony from hell. And then our hero was not playing around. He cut the monster the size of a truck and stood there, breathing heavily as if he had run a marathon. He glanced back and asked the soldiers if they were still holding firm. The atmosphere was tense, and he, ever brave, offered to cover that side while they made a strategic retreat. But when he checked, only the last of the warriors was still standing. Aylin's heart froze, turning pale, and the boy felt a rage that seemed like an explosion inside him. He began to curse all those monsters, unleashing a surge of power as he shouted for them to get lost already. Then the tower gleamed with immense beauty, and a door opened beneath the wall, revealing a monstrous cannon. And it wasn't just any cannon, it wasn't a giant beauty. Someone, shouting amidst the chaos, called out to Aelin. It was from headquarters informing that the Guardian cannon was fully charged and ready for action. And sure enough, a horde of monsters charged forward as if there were no tomorrow. Aelin, steadfast and fearless, ordered the crew to fire. The cannons unleashed a powerful beam, covering a huge area and raining down power from the outside, exploding everything. Many monsters were taken out. The explosions were breathtaking. Joe, from the outside, watched it all with a grim expression as if he had witnessed hell. The explosions, one after another, seemed endless. Finally, the area was cleared, and the noise of the cannons paused. He noticed that most of the monsters had already become history, and those that remained ran away as if they had seen the devil. He explained that the Guardian cannon deals with hordes but needs time to recharge before firing again. She revealed that usually, when an A-class abyssal breach occurs, they can sense energy spikes days or even weeks in advance, giving them time to prepare. But this time, my friend, he fell, silent, not knowing what to think. Aelin's body trembled, and she admitted that there had been no warning at all, something out of this world. Joe, for his part, just listened and gave her a pat on the back like a good friend does. Before him, many bodies showed the brutality of the battle. Joe told her that none of this was her fault, to ease the pressure a bit. She already knew that, but tears started to slip down her face. She admitted that it was hard to cope with the situation. Suddenly, an explosion out of nowhere. Then it was total chaos. They were caught off guard, as if a bomb had dropped from the sky. Something was dragging on the ground, kicking up an infinite cloud of dust, and suddenly, a gigantic monster emerged like a nightmare brought to life. It was full of tentacles and aimed at the cannons, ready to cause more destruction. The protagonist could hardly believe what was happening. He was paralyzed. Suddenly, the colossal creature attacked the wall, and the structure collapsed with a bang. As it fell, he opened his eyes and realized that Aelin was also in free fall. A careful concern washed over him, man, but he used his long gorilla arms to reach for the girl. He managed to grab her, and with his other arm, he clung to the rocks. What tension, huh? Startled, he opened his eyes and saw that all their cannons had turned to dust in the blink of an eye. Joe was in shock as he faced the monstrous form before him. Damn monster. It had a head resembling that of a shark, a huge mouth, sharp teeth, multiple eyes, and a body covered in tentacles. It looked like a nightmare. He shouted for it not to let that creature destroy the wall. Things were getting very serious. Then both of them moved quickly and aimed for the monster's head. Maximum concentration! Joe threw his spear, and Aelin released her blade. It was attack time, but man, that was when frustration hit. They both attacked at the same time, and nothing. Joe had to take a step back because, honestly, the creature's skin was like a tank. Determined, he started aiming for the monster's eyes and managed to hit one of them, but it barely scratched the damn thing. Feeling lost in space, he was thrown far away and fell like a sack of potatoes. Meanwhile, the monstrous bastard began to bite the wall and eat it as if it were a snack. He watched in horror as part of the wall was being torn away. Aelin, not holding back her words, yelled a curse loudly. Joe quickly joined her, both panicking about the impending collapse of the wall. Then, the monster looked up at the sky, and my friend opened that massive mouth, seeming ready to devour them at any moment. But suddenly, a blonde-haired man appeared, raised the red hammer, and brought it down on the monster. They were both in shock. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. Aelin recognized the man. It was Captain Lingual. Just to remind you, he was the captain of Unit 1 of the extermination team. Man, he grew up with them. It was like he was part of the family. Joe was in denial for a second, telling himself it couldn't be that guy was their captain. Aelin looked super proud while introducing the captain of the team. She mentioned that the guy was the second in command of Commander Corps of the extermination force, and explained that all this weakened appearance of his was due to the ability that made him control his own blood in battle. That blood drained from the monsters turned into fists. The captain, my friend, was controlling several blood fists in the air. Aelin was sure Joe couldn't be fooled by that appearance. Joe's eyes widened in surprise when one of the fists hit the monster, which howled in pain. The creature got furious, and soon its limbs started charging at Lingual. Joe and Aelin quickly got out of there when the monster decided to cause some major destruction in the area they were in. Then, while dodging the monster's attack, Joe was like, wow, this is going to go badly, because with that insane charge, even a crack formed in the city wall, and he was really worried about the captain. But Aelin, calm as ever, told him to relax, as she was sure that a hit like that wouldn't even scratch Lingual. Ling blocked the hit with a giant staff, stood his ground, and immediately decided to counterattack with his monstrous hammer. Then, the blood hammer turned into a trap that ensnared the monster like a canned sardine. The creature got trapped and started roaring, like the out-of-control king of the jungle. He, full of courage, bit his own thumb to release blood and aim at the crew buried there. He saw fear, anger, and sadness in their eyes, eyes and claimed he had heard everything. Then he used the blood that flowed from his thumb and, believe it or not, formed a blood sword worthy of legends. He declared that, with the remnants of her blood, he would put an end to the beast. The monster roared as if it felt death was very near, like now Lingual was in deep trouble. He swung the bloodied sword with all his might and sliced the monster in half. It was a scene worthy of cinema. Joey, in shock, stood there with his mouth agape, watching as the monster's massive body split in two and exploded like a Hollywood special effect. He simply couldn't believe the pressure he was feeling. Now, he had a real sense of the power that the captain of the first squad possessed. After that, blood rained down on Lingual. It must have looked like a horror movie. He turned to Aelin and said he was proud of everyone, like, "You are brave." He was sure that no one faltered. Deep down, he felt that their blood still boiled with that fighting spirit. However, Aelin told him to take care of the bleeding finger first. He hadn't even noticed the cut because he was caught up in the excitement. My bad. After realizing the injury on his finger, he went looking for a bandage, but Aelin was already equipped. He chuckled and remarked that the pain in his finger would be dealt with after he killed the Abyssal Lord, as if to say, "It's just a scratch." Joey smartened up and realized that relaxing was not a viable option at the moment. As much as he had evolved since he returned, compared to a captain, he knew the journey was still long for him. He looked up at the sky and spotted the aircraft approaching at 1,000 miles per hour. Then, out of nowhere, bombings started rolling in, and the ground was rocked by explosions. Z, inside a mecha, waved to Joe and said that from now on, the Zhang family's technology was in their hands. He informed him that the entire defense system of the city of Nirai was devised with their technology, and by dawn, the repair drones would restore the walls. Joe was impressed and said that compared to the primitive technology of the old outpost, all of this felt like a village from ancient times. No wonder people want to move to the city of Nirai, right? Ling Xiao then informed him that the commander wanted him and Aelin to present themselves to the Supreme Council, and that DI was also in the picture. Joe, unable to hold back, replied that the wall wouldn't be fixed anytime soon, and that if everyone left, the monsters would definitely return. Ling Xiao contradicted him, saying he was actually going to stay. He would be happy if the monsters showed up because he could use that as warm-up. So they obeyed the order and went to the city parliament building of Nirai. Aelin, Joe, and Jay were in front of monstrous screens. Lin Hall started reporting the mess that had happened, and soon Aelin also sent in her summary. Rods, with a look of disbelief, stared at them. The boss of the group, John, and the father of the family, began firing off information, saying that the invasion of the city Nirai happened due to some crafty sabotage of the central power system, which prevented the defenses from being activated in time. A true shitstorm. He also threw in that Aelin lent a hand, confirming that as soon as the power was restored, the city's defenses were shining. He suggested that the council start a complete investigation to uncover this whole mess. Then Genting entered, the head of the Bay family and the intelligence director, who immediately ordered the intelligence department to take charge of the investigation, but he made sure to make it clear that there was an even more urgent issue to discuss. And Wei, with a critical look, counter-argued, making it clear that Genting just wanted to sweep the blame under the rug. A woman, seemingly out of nowhere, shouted at them to stop this nonsense. This unusual figure was Taisia, the head of the user family and the high priestess of the Church of Hope, showing that she wasn't joking around. She stated that the top priority had to be the issue with that Class A Basal anomaly that had appeared out of nowhere. Curious, she turned to Commander Kor and asked when the Abyss suppression team was going to enter the field. Now he, all worried, replied that the extermination team and the brutes from each faction were already in position, but there had been an incident. He showed a video he had received shortly before the meeting. The video had a sinister creature just like the one Lynchel had faced, attacking a truck with its tentacles. It was frightening. The unfortunate guy in the video was screaming for help, saying that Installation 12 was under attack by monsters. A real mess. With no idea, he didn't know that it was Aelin who had revealed that the installation was John's most secret one, and her sister was the boss over there. And look, until then he didn't have access to what they were researching out there. Her concern about her sister grew. It was serious business. Joey was shocked to discover that something so important was outside the city walls, a real chaos. Aelin defended herself, saying it should be inside, but the council rejected the plan due to the risks involved with that advanced technology. They were basically forced to move the facility outside the city walls, a risky move. Joe then realized it was a crazy plan to screw things up and make the situation tense. She questioned whether they had managed to evacuate everyone and if her sister was okay. On the tape, Kor confessed there was no alert signal at all and that almost everyone in the facility was still in that mess. He was thinking about delaying the suppression team and sending Linkiel to lead a rescue mission at Facility 12 first, but Taija wouldn't let it go and lashed out, saying that the church felt the energy within the Abyss, a growing energy. If they didn't eliminate the Lord of the Abyss soon, things could spiral completely out of control. Kor, without hesitation, decided that Captain Pharaoh from Team 2 would handle the rescue, while the suppression team would stick to the original plan. Gentinga, with a grim expression, said the plan wouldn't work, and he was right. He argued that the team didn't have the minimum necessary of 10 level 1 awakened to invade a class. Abbas, especially with the commander in charge, Oi, extremely irritated, blamed Genting, saying he had forced Facility 12 outside the city. He wasn't going to sit back and just wait for the people to die calmly, and along with Olaf, who was the military chief and the speaker of the parliament, they prioritized taking down the Abyssal Lord, because the longer they waited, the more dangerous it became for the city. He concluded by stating that the suppression team would proceed as per the initial plan, without discussions. Deep down, he just thought he was a useless idiot for not joining Olaf's family sooner and now was waiting for help. And he knew that Rhodes was giving a nice speech, but deep down, he just wanted to crush the John family. And at that moment, he was sure he was plotting something. Joe, getting the hang of the situation, realized that none of them intended to help our hero. With an attitude only he has, he grabbed everyone's attention and declared that he was going to face the situation alone. Not that he was crazy, but you know his courage simply defied the laws of gravity. Meanwhile, the drama was heating up when a giant helicopter appeared in the sky, all powerful, looking more like a flying tank than a rescue machine. This beast was used by the military to transport troops, and now it was heading towards a crater from which a red and black beam was emanating. Where have I seen this before? Oh yes, on the Hell menu. The lightning crawled along the ground as if it had a life of its own, creating a scene worthy of a horror movie. As soon as the helicopter stopped, Joey and Aylin found themselves in front of a truck, like the protagonists of a movie where the apocalypse is just another normal day. With her usual demeanor, she warned Joe that all the extermination troops, including her, were on the front line to deal with the Abyss. What a situation, right? He was going to have to carry on with the rescue mission without direct help. Joe remembered the meeting where the Supreme Defense Council had simply turned their backs on the rescue. Man, what a blunder. Every soldier from the extermination force had to join the suppression team for the Abyss, meaning goodbye support, and he who already had his plans replied that he wasn't an official police officer from the extermination force yet, and that he was offering to rescue the research facility. 12 weren't going to stop this kid. Commander Corey, on the other hand, had crossed everything out, defying the council just to help the crew and prevent the monsters from getting past them. That was already a huge help, like a savior of the universe of misfits. Joey had a few brave souls with him, G, who was worried about his sister's safety, and the two rivals who had questioned his ability in the first competition. Ah, this competitive life is crazy, and Aylin made sure to jump on the rescue train too. For he had met Joey during the torturous training in the Abyss, you'll know she wasn't just a coffee user. By extension, Joe made it clear that this mission wouldn't be a walk in the park, unlike defending the city. Mingai and he had little idea of the danger awaiting them. There, the two guys called him boss, and it was clear they were with him until the end. Look at that team's spirit. Filled with gratitude, she said he had saved her life once, so she owed him. This had an action movie vibe, all the responsibility on his shoulders. Suddenly, the loudspeakers announced they were approaching the drop zone, and the rescue crew was instructed to gear up for action. Now that's what I like. Joe, with his humility, thanked them for trusting him. Look how nice the kid is. He just didn't think to say much more than that, and then told the rescue team to move forward like, time to face the trouble head on. Everyone responded with, yes sir. Look at that war discipline. The helicopter door opened, and the truck sped away as if it were in a Hollywood action movie. A moving truck. Joe looked back through the rearview mirror, thinking about what was to come when someone called him Z, who is not just any guy. Then he dropped a bomb. Before leaving, Joe's father had said that no matter how this all ended, the only thing he regretted was not being strong enough to bring his daughter out himself. Wow, that's heavy. And man, Zay had saved everyone's skin twice in the darkest times, and the Zhang family never forgot that kindness. Joy replied that she knew well what it felt like to be trapped, waiting for someone to save her like a sad movie. No one wanted to live that. He then told Zay that if he didn't help now, he would regret it. And that big-hearted prince of his decided he wanted to be true to himself. Later, Joe asked him to stop calling him benefactor because people would think he was some old geezer. He wasn't much older than Z and suggested that he call him bro. No, fancy stuff. As they got closer, the sky was grim, covered by thick smoke. The thing that was burning was on fire, while the buildings seemed to scream for help. They got off the truck, and that's when Joe realized that the monsters were attacking with the same fury that had rolled through Mingai City. He thought, God save us, we're late to the party. Suddenly, a scream echoed from beneath the rubble. The situation was already painted with chaos and seemed to be worsening. A hand emerged from a crack, and Joe and Jay ran to help as if there were no tomorrow. There lay a man, half his body trapped under the debris, looking like he had lived a day from hell. He was so weak that it made one wonder if someone had drained his energy. Hey, with the courage of a lion, he asked the guy to hold hold on while he prepared to help him. But Joe's antennas were picking up a warning signal. It was clear that the situation was getting tense, and they needed to do something before it was too late. He tapped Jay, warning him to be careful because the trouble was real. As soon as he finished speaking, a sinister liquid oozed from the guy's hand and stuck to Jay's arm. To make matters worse, this liquid had a bizarre core with a single eye. Jay, sensing the vibe, realized that the monster was armed to ambush them. The water creature held Jay while the man was stuck waist-deep in the water. He was so desperate that he begged to be killed already. Jay, catching on, realized that the man was just bait and then saw his hand starting to melt. Holy crap. Luck was on their side because someone was coming. The guy cut the water and Jay managed to free himself, but as nothing is easy, the water reattached and grabbed Joe again. What a bummer. With sniper focus, Joe used his eye and realized that the monster was the juvenile version of Liquid Goliath, and guess what? The creature's body was all liquid. Cutting him was useless. It was like throwing water on fire. So Joe told Jay that physical attacks wouldn't be the solution. They needed to destroy the crystal core near the shoulder, but Joe was having a hard time spotting the weak point. What? A drag! Joe gathered all his strength in his arm and decided to freeze the thing like a superhero. Then, in a burst of adrenaline, they cut the monster in half, and he shattered like he was butter. By now, it was well past nightfall, and Joe, crouched next to the trapped man, felt really sad because he had seen that guy at last week's meeting, and now he was like this. Things are getting rough. Our boy remembered that when he lived at the outpost, the folks who went out to get food always came back half empty. Yeah, folks, that's what it's like to live in the middle of an apocalypse. Just heartbreak. Isle called the captain and said there was no sign of more survivors around. They tried all communication frequencies, but there was no response. What tension. This left Isle wondering if it was really meant to be this way. Usia, all emotional, told Joe that the main part of the research facility was down below, like a labyrinth. The defense system down there was heavy and should hold off the monsters. Hopefully. He was hoping that his sister and the others had hidden down there. But before anyone could relax, the ground just exploded. The guys were in total shock and soon spotted several water monsters emerging. In a panic, in that desperation, he charged in, freezing everything like it was his freezing power. But his gloves were already starting to come apart like poorly made bread. Isle and the two men also suffered the attack of the monsters. It was tough going through that. The water monster rose over them, looking like it didn't come to be nice. Isle shot electricity from her staff and even hit the monster, but to everyone's surprise, it barely did anything. Then suddenly, some red thin beings like ropes surrounded them and they were all trapped there. But don't worry, because our protagonist arrived on the scene and pulled everyone away, saving them from the attack. Meanwhile, Zoe was over there, surrounded by water, shaking and without a shred of hope. Poor kid. He started crying, calling for his sister, a heartbreaking scene. And suddenly, he heard someone calling his name. The person asked if he could hear her. What a twist. When our hero finally recognized it was his sister, a smile blossomed on his face as if the sun had shone after the storm. Through the screen, Adele didn't waste any time and asked if it was really his sister, as if he couldn't believe what he saw. Thus, his sister looked through the screen, surrounded by her own water monsters that behaved as if they were in the middle of a party. Looking through the screen, they realized that 4 monsters were watching, just observing, like curious bystanders. She turned her head and told everyone that the priority was to distract the monster first, or it would be over. This is Jay's sister and her name is John, the group announced, creating an instant connection. Meanwhile, Joe realized that the situation had turned dire. They were surrounded and it was time to act. And then, my friend, Joe got burned badly, as if he had just come out of a steamroller, with steam coming off him like in a cartoon. Soon after, our boy took off in a crazy sprint, looking like a rocket launching. He shouted for everyone to follow him, like a leader trying to save the team. His sister, soon as she had the chance, told him to go right, with the agility of a ninja. Finally, she instructed everyone to turn left at the next corner, and to run up everything as quickly as a thought. But the water monster seemed relentless, and was literally on their tail. Joe found the entrance, and like it was a marathon, they all ran in and closed the door just in time, right when the monster tried to break in. Everyone was panting, as if they had run a half marathon, and took a look at the little screen on the ceiling. Then, John Joy appeared on the screen, smiling at them, as if to say everything was under control. Joe felt a tremendous relief seeing her there, as he thought everything was already done for. Young Joy, filled with joy, announced that she had managed to create a crystal that kept growing, like an unending funk. Joe, trying to maintain his composure, apologized for the interruption, and asked if someone could help explain the situation. Johnny also apologized, as if that would be enough to resolve the issue. She then explained that since the abyssal invasion started, there hadn't been time to evacuate, and things got tense. The facility was surrounded by monsters as soon as they appeared out of nowhere, like a robbery. They were monsters trying to break through the underground floors. non-stop, and she believes they are all summoned servants, a true legion. She then showed the captured water monster as if it were a trophy. Yao, with that face of someone who just got punched in the face, was stunned to learn that they were studying live monsters at the facility. Johnny Joe replied that, in reality, the Awakers can only get stronger when they collect crystals from higher-level monsters, but if their power exceeded the original level of the crystal, then why didn't the strength release? It was all an energy bottleneck. The fluid golems devoured each other to evolve and become stronger in a really crazy way, creating crystals that grow with the power of whoever carries them. She was jumping with joy for her sister because now she had managed to do this. She confirmed that yes, and because of what she did, now everyone could have a crystal that would unleash their full potential. But wait, there's a catch. Instead of instant strength increase, this method is more gradual. Joe asked the group to give it a break, knowing that congratulating was important, but the reality was that they had no chance to fight for the main entrance to rescue the rest. He then asked if there was any way to reach them. Johnny Joy firmly asked them to forget about it, as if to say, that's none of your business. And to add that dramatic touch, she pressed a button that revealed the layout of the underground hideout, showing that the trouble was just beginning. She was like, you see? Indicating that the place was already a no-go, but instead, she explained that she was going to take the group to the internal database so they could access the research data and get out of this mess. The girl could hardly believe she was spilling this. It was like saying that our boy had to stay there watching her in trouble, doing nothing. John Joe made a point of shouting that the growth crystal technology was more important than anything, but Joe shrugged it off. He said that if she didn't have a better plan, he would just go ahead and invade. This left her speechless, just staring as if she had been doused with cold water. In the end, she confessed that she had an option up her sleeve. He said that each underground level had a railway transport system to move supplies. The tunnels were closed, so they were intact for the time being and could use this for their escape. The problem was that the central room had already been destroyed, so the tracks were in darkness, with no power at all. To fix this, they would need to restore the power station on the surface first and open the main gate to the city of Mingai. But opening that gate would make a hell of a noise and attract all the nearby monsters, and whoever opened it wouldn't be able to go back. Got it? In short, it was very dangerous. Joe, all confident, said they would stick together and that he would head straight for the transport track. He told G to restore the power while he would take care of the gate at the station. They both looked inside and were more lost than a blind man in a shootout about what it was. There was a monstrous tower full of wires. G told them to follow his instructions. When they saw a light come on, they had to press the button on the side. He stuck the wires into his fingers and even had the audacity to press the earpiece. Man, with that, he connected to the system, and the power was going to be restored in 600 seconds. He asked how the others were doing. Joe and Yao were heading to the entrance. They were just a few steps from the gate. Joe shouted that they had arrived and assured that they would get there before John restored the power. I warned him that as soon as the power came back, he had 30 seconds to open the gate. If the gate didn't open in time, the transport car wouldn't make it through, so the kid needed to hurry. Meanwhile, the researchers started to gather their stuff. An older researcher asked another to copy the recordings of the final experiment. Then, another researcher informed Director Zhang that the injured were already on the transport car. She said over the intercom that they were also ready because she had sent everyone to board, and everything that wasn't ready on time was sent to space. Everyone rushed and jumped on the train. She asked if everyone was there because they had only 10 seconds left. Joe replied that the gate was in hand. Director Juom shouted that the transport car was already in position. Jay turned on the power, and out of nowhere, the area around the transport car lit up, almost as if they had won the Mega Sena lottery. Everyone's eyes were wide open, looking around in the vibe of, what's going on here, folks? Then Director Zhang, all happy, announced the news. The power at the underground station had been restored. What a party. But one of the injured people by the window took a look outside and, my brother, Ruthie was shocked. The monsters were approaching rapidly, and to top it all off, several fluid Goliaths began to advance, making that noise of, come on, I'm waiting for you. Director John, already pumped with adrenaline, told everyone to hold on tight like a coach on game day. He pressed the power button and the train started moving as if it had just had an energy drink. They left the fluid Goliaths behind, who tried to chase them, but as the saying goes, those who don't run, fly. They reached a gate that opened instantly, like magic, and managed to get through. Phew. But what's the deal? The fluid Goliath wasn't that easy and broke through the gate, corroding the metal like it was cheese. The researchers started shouting for them to go faster, desperate, because the creatures were coming with insane thirst. Director Zhang, with calmness, explained that they had already reached the maximum power of the engine, so, my dear, they couldn't accelerate anymore. Then, out of nowhere, giant fluid Goliaths began to appear, but the good news was that they fired shots in their direction. One of the researchers, who couldn't believe it, saw a machine gun on the side and was shocked. It was really crazy. It kept firing, and in the meantime, explosions started happening, with the zoom all focused on the machine gun, and to everyone's surprise, eyes, they discovered that G was the one controlling the defense towers. Look at that guy. They felt a bit relieved, but then an annoying alert informed Director John that the gate opening signal had not been detected. She was left with that nagging feeling, wondering what had happened. The gate was stuck on the balance. The situation couldn't be worse because the damn hydraulics broke down. If the gate didn't open soon, the whole plan would go down the drain. The widespread disaster would be epic. Joy and Yao were as lost as a cat on moving day. They couldn't believe that the gate had gone haywire. The transport truck was already in the area. Zay yelled that the transport truck was arriving and the crowd got excited. He and the two men jumped on top of the truck's roof, looking like an action movie scene. He slid down like a movie star and found his older sister, and the emotion was heart-wrenching. He hugged her, crying with gratitude because she had made it, but she told him to stop that because the gate was still the biggest problem. Meanwhile, Yao was by the gate, checking, and found out that the hydraulics were indeed broken. Ji quickly commented that there was no time for anything. It was time to decide. If everything fell apart, they would have to abandon the truck, and that would be it. But Director Zhang wasn't having it. No, man! She said that the place was full of monsters, and if they abandoned the truck, they would be slaughtered. Did they realize that the truck was the only safe way back to the city? Our boy Joe decided to try to push the gate. Man, he was in great cobra monkey mode. He gritted his teeth and went for it, trying to widen the opening as if he were in a strongman competition. Yao informed everyone that Joe said he was going to push the gate, and the crowd couldn't believe it. The older researcher thought it was a joke. The gate needed 10,000 tons of hydraulic presses to move, so clearly there was no way a human could exert that force. But Joe, my son, was different. Our hero Joe was pushing harder than ever, but the situation was complicated. Even with the great cobra monkey arm activated, he realized he couldn't move that damn thing. So, in a burst of creativity, he decided to turn his whole body into a gate opening machine. What won't? You do for a job, right? His form changed, and suddenly the sticky tongue came into play. He used that crazy tongue to pull everything forward with insane tension. Then, he activated the venomous spider stinger. He thought about using his stinger to anchor his legs to the ground and not get blown away. His muscles stretched like rubber bands, and he gave it everything he had, gritting his teeth. The crazy guy was pushing himself to the limit, contorting to make it happen. The system turned and said he was tearing everything apart, and soon it began to make repairs, like a pit stop in a race. Yao, who was there in disbelief, couldn't believe his eyes. Joe was already bleeding from the mouth, but even so, being he kept compressing every ounce of strength with those elastic muscles, it was all or nothing. The crew, frustrated, the beast exploded with energy, and it seemed like the gate was going to move for good. Yao, in shock, managed to report that the gate was opening. Like, can you believe it? The researcher's jaw dropped, almost hitting the floor in disbelief. Joe, the director, was like, there's no way that crazy plan actually worked. Then he asked for 3 more minutes, or maybe 2, but the fluid Goliath started dripping from the ceiling and suddenly collapsed, aiming for Joe. As if he had perfect aim, he let out a curse and cursed the moment, as if it couldn't go wrong at a worse time. And worst of all, he couldn't even afford to use one hand to defend himself. That's when she showed up and asked if he could hold on for a little longer. It was then that he realized someone was preparing for action. Joe, all dressed in a suit, saw her jump off the train and, Skinny, our friend, started asking where she was going. She told him to stay out of it and focus on the plans to bring everyone back safely, like a leader, you know? And she went all out, knowing she needed to open the last underground floor and let the monster master draw all the trouble away. And there she was fighting the fluid Goliath, electrocuting him, but the monsters were coming in swarms. It was an army. Meanwhile, Joe stayed steady in position, even with that fluid Goliath coiling around him. Director, Joe sent word that she would release the monster master underground to lure everyone down there. She told him to hold on tight and open the gate before the train arrived. Full pressure. The monster's face was just a few inches from DJ Joy, and that thing started to cover his face to try to drown the poor guy. And the train, as if nothing was happening, kept on its way. The men, already in despair, pointed to something. You can see the gate, but he knows they won't make it in time. She took a glance and realized they were already halfway through the speed and couldn't afford to slow down more. They had to speed up. Everyone in the transport car was panicking as they saw the monster passing through the gaps. The creature had already pierced the roof of the train. The driver had to slam on the gas all of a sudden. He pressed the button, and to a miracle, the fluid's intake was pushed away, at least for now. The guys there looked out the window and saw. They simply couldn't believe it. It had disappeared like magic. They thought they had managed to shake the creature off, but out of nowhere, it approached again, like a ghost. The man up there, who was doing fine, was shocked to see what happened. The monster wrapped around him and threw him away, as if it was a joke. The monster had already shown its form inside the train, and the researchers, poor souls, were completely hopeless, like crying bawling their eyes out. But then, the old researcher at the back saw the trouble unfolding and started to think. He got excited, pressed a button on his little device, and showed his equipment. It seemed like he had everything under control. Zal saw him in the strange outfit and quickly realized he had a plan. He then announced that the young were the future, while the older ones burned everything left to face the situation. Then, in an act of courage, he ran out of the train. Meanwhile, tears began to well up in Jay's eyes as he watched the scene from afar, and Uncle Day caught the monster's attention. Like, "Hey, look over here!" Uncle Day even tried to block the creature's path, but held down a warning button. There was an explosion, and then, man, Jay felt so bad, he started to cry like a baby. Meanwhile, Yo struggled to hold the monster while Joe was practically drowning in the mix. And in that chaos, Dai let out a first-rate curse to de-stress. A deafening crack echoed. It felt like someone had cranked the sound up to maximum volume. They covered their ears. One of the guys with them asked what was happening. It was a real mystery. She spotted a surprising sight. All the monsters were massing back towards the main building, as if they had received a call. Furthermore, the car's brakes were stuck, meaning things were about to get ugly because they couldn't slow down. One of the buddies suggested they jump, because otherwise they were going to collide, and nobody wanted to be pizza. Ozzy shot back that jumping at high speed was the same as colliding, you know? Everyone was counting on Joe. He was focused, doing his best to open that door. They were cheering as if it were the finals of the World Cup. He took that responsibility of holding the gate seriously. When the door swung open with a bang, he jumped up, looking like a superhero. The crowd went wild, cheering like kids on a party day. Yao got into the transport vehicle completely panicked because she couldn't see Joe beside her. He told them to take the others back to the city first, promising he would save his sister at any cost, but the car had already disappeared. Meanwhile, deep down in the underground lab, Director Joe was filming something, thinking about the bunch of Goliaths outside. He noticed that the Goliath in human form had a strange face with red eyes, and the other Goliaths were already coming for him. Director Joe, utterly confused and surprised, could only watch the chaos as they attacked the Arconium. Water everywhere, with the Goliaths being absorbed, merging with the Arconium, like some crazy business. The realization hit the director. Those monsters weren't just letting themselves be devoured. There was a plan at play. The Arbalist was pulling some trick to lure them in. While trying to escape from the Goliath, they needed to devour the light to grow stronger, and then they would challenge their own master. The guys charged at the Arbalist, but like a cat among pigeons, it was just a splash of water and the creature's head was done for. Director Joy looked at the scene and thought people were trying to find a way to free themselves, just not like that. The part that had been torn started to stick back together. What the hell, man? And the crossbow, in an act of fury, wrapped its legs around the cunning fluid Goliath and merged with it, creating a bright light that looked more like the end of the world. Joey had to cover her eyes because the thing splashed like a giant. It was meant to blind anyone, but curiosity got the better of her, and she opened her eyes. Wait, what was that? A well-formed figure, humanoid in shape, but made of water. It was something like a mix between a human and a mermaid, only with curly hair and a pearlescent sheen, an incredibly surreal sight. She was all excited about the fluid Goliath's new evolutionary phase, thinking she had seen everything in life, but no, in fact, she was just getting started. In a huge rush, she began to document everything in research notation number 12, hoping that someone would someday find those images. Then she pressed a button, and small towers sprouted from the ground. She had to deal with those damn towers, so she decided to spray a little mist, and the fluid Goliath soon cracked with the stuff. The fluid goalie got confused and broke free, slicing one of its legs. It regenerated quickly and trampled the towers as if they were paper. Director Joy had the look of someone who didn't expect this plot twist. She wasted no time and aimed more towers at it, freezing the monster's shoulder. It turns out it had just learned how humans used energy. With all its strength, it crushed its own frozen arm as if it were nothing. Joe had that realization, noticing that her freezing ray wasn't doing any good. She pressed the button again and fired the beams. It took a light beating, but it was still just an appetizer. And surprise, the Goliath began to absorb the attacks as if it were a vacuum cleaner. Joe was left open-mouthed when she realized it was evolving to the point of adapting each time it got hit. It then turned its attention to her, extended its arm as if about to grab her, but had a sudden realization. It was you who trapped me here, right? It was curious to know what would happen if it devoured a human, and with a devilish grin, said it was going to savor every bite. Joey shouted, shut her eyes, and felt lost. She didn't know what to do. And out of nowhere, in a blaze like the sun, the fluid golem set her free. What the hell is going on? He was shocked because not only did Joey appear, but she also saved him. What a twist. Joey, still tense, looked closely at that monster, and the first thing that came out was, "You're an idiot," just the right way to break the tension. She was really worried because the creature truly wanted her dead, and now it was going to take both of them. She delivered an impassioned speech, expressing her hatred for plans where someone sacrificed themselves to save others. He then decided he would get stronger so that he would never have to see that happen happen again. The director teased him, calling him a cringe idiot. But you know it's love, man. In the end, the fluid goalie shouted, "That's enough," thinking he was the big shot. Joyce just looked at him with that expression like, "I didn't understand anything." Our boy then asked if he was the leader of the monsters, curious because he seemed so small. And where were the other monsters? She replied that the others had been devoured by him. What a ride, huh? The fluid golem, who was a fierce creature, realized that she had control of the situation and became furious because, look, she locked the kid up and tortured him day and night, even when he begged like a dog being stepped on. The guys then started laughing at him as if it were entertainment, and now he wanted revenge. Wow, who wouldn't want that? Joe, with that look of someone who's angry, shot a fierce glare at the creature and even took a jab at director Joe, saying that her research methods were a bit excessive. But the director, unfazed, just smiled, because let's face it, he had a magical core that kept evolving, so, like, who cares? And Joe's reaction? Just a big grin of someone who knows he's on top. Our boy told the monster straight up that they had turned everything into a desert and that there was nothing wrong with asking for a little help from human science. Come on. He even dropped the gem that humans deserve to die, as if that wouldn't end badly. Then, in an act of fury, he reached out his arm to punch Joe. Honestly, Joe was already in survivor mode. She prepared for the attack and was squeezed between the beast's fist and the wall, which caused a sense of secondhand embarrassment. But the monster didn't stop there. It grabbed Joe, lifted its arm, and threw him against the ceiling like a crumpled piece of paper, making him cough up blood. Joe, caught off guard, saw the monster right in front of her, almost ready to deliver a fatal kick. The creature's foot landed squarely in the center of her back, with an impact that could take down an elephant, sending dust flying everywhere. Meanwhile, director Joe was just worried, rooting for both of them. As the monster waited for the dust to settle, it watched closely like a horror movie spectator, paying attention to every movement, and showed Joe kneeling on the ground, resembling a scene from an epic fight. He couldn't believe something so small could have such destructive power, as if he had underestimated the strength of what seems weak. The system then alerted that Goliath was gaining full strength from everything it swallowed, and that was not good at all. Joe, with a strategy in mind, used his skills to find the weak point. He had nothing to fear about it. Soon, our boy surged forward with blood in his eyes. The monster, in an attempt to dominate, extended its arms, grabbed him, and lifted him into the air like a puppet. Then, out of nowhere, the god Cockroach appeared, informing that Goliath constantly evolves to adapt to attacks. What a terrifying thing. Joe couldn't help but complain that he should have been warned about this mess beforehand, and Goliath, in a malicious moment, tried to shred Joe apart with a look that suggested he had done this 1,000 times before. And then, wouldn't you know it, our hero started to bleed, but he wasn't going to give up. He gritted his teeth despite the pain, looking more determined than ever. You know, his arm then transformed, and he finally managed to cut the monster, quite a feat. Goliath was shocked, looking as if it never expected to take that hit. Joe then activated a trait called Corrosive Blade, which was an evolution of his previous skills. Feeling like the greatest, he didn't stop there. On his leg, he had the Melted Blade, which was also an evolution. Man, he kicked the monster with all his might and got hurt. Like crazy. But the thing decided to retaliate. Only Joe was ready to counterattack. Plus, the fists of both met in the middle of the exchange, and the impact was so intense that it made director Joe scream. Then, to cap it off, Joe activated the needle's shell, which made the fight even crazier. With that, the poisonous spider tail injected paralyzing venom with a touch that went from head to toe. The venom climbed up the monster's arm, and that's when Joe managed to push the thing back, which was an epic victory. Director Joe was stunned because our hero Joe revealed he was a rare shapeshifter, but there, in that moment, he looked more like a fanciful version of a monster. He then pulled out his melted blade, ready to stab the thing and put an end to that trouble. Suddenly, he released a powerful flame, but damn, to his surprise, the big monster didn't even get hurt by it. The monster, with an evil laugh, said he was out of time. Like, dude, it's intense. The realization hit Joe. The thing was evolving too fast, and that was concerning. With just a few blows, the creature was already resisting his melted blade as if it were paper. Then, 3 arrows flew and hit the monster's back, giving a boost to the situation. He turned his head, visibly irritated. Director Joe, holding a bow, announced he was with him in this fight. Joe couldn't hide his surprise. His strategy was starting to bear fruit. The monster reached out, hastening to grab the arrow. It jumped high to dodge and shot another arrow, but the thing simply absorbed it. The monster was furious and was left speechless when Joe cut off its hand. It groaned in pain, and I was like, wow. Director Joe realized that attacking it with multiple types of power at once actually worked. He said that humans who steal divine power always take a shortcut, and that's the weakness of evil. Director Joe let out some curses, realizing that the fluid Goliath had a trick up its sleeve. Any magic crystal affected by it became completely inoperative. She shouted that it was time, and they only had one chance. As despair took over, Joe was left speechless when she released the arrow, and it pierced through as if it were butter. She watched the reaction, and the monster, already full of mischief, charged in with sound waves. The two prepared for anything. Nothing seemed to happen at first, until her bow lost all its light. She was like, "What now?" The monster laughed at them, saying that a human without a crystal core was just an insect to be squashed. She fell to her knees, thinking, "Dude, I'm so slow." Concern took over her as her power was messing everything up, and there was nothing she could do. The big monster squatted in front of her and said he would absorb her slowly and wanted her screams. Out of nowhere, the monster's cheek met Joe's fist in an epic twist. He threw a powerful punch, sending the beast flying to the opposite side. The monster fell to the ground, unable to believe that punch had been real. Joe stared him down, marking his territory. He wondered how he would come out unscathed to the principal. Joe was shocked, thinking he was using out-of-the-ordinary abilities. While observing a monster, he let out some outraged curses. Our hero was shocked, not understanding how Joe was still using his powers, but soon his muscles began to grow in a sinister way. He shouted to the crowd that they were alone in this mess, so there was no escaping the trouble. Determined to show everything that others had tried against him, he wanted to prove they were completely useless. In a humorous manner, he smiled and thanked for the reminder, calling the big guy to come at him. A bright light flooded the scene, and a hefty creature stomped heavily on the ground. A colossal and terrifying creature then appeared out of nowhere. Principal Joe's eyes widened, completely stunned. She wondered if Joe had really summoned a boss. The big guy knelt heavily. He was large with a spiny black torso. The fluid goalie then recognized the big guy as Bloom and questioned why he was there. He heard the conversation and realized that the horned warlord in the hidden realm had a real name. He wondered if there was any connection between them, like brother. The big guy responded with a fierce look, and he raised his fist, ready for action. Then flames began to swirl around his fist, and he threw a punch at the fluid Goliath. In that moment, the fluid Goliath blocked the blow with its forearms, realizing that the big guy had become a dog for the humans. They were glued to each other, face to face, before the big guy summoned his weapon while the fluid Goliath pulled out a sword, and that's when the real fight began. The weapons collided with a deafening noise. Director Joe, who had never seen that monster before, was stunned to notice that it was overpowering the evolved Goliath. This only heightened her curiosity about who Joe really was. In her mind, she wondered if he was really human. She didn't believe that such a strong creature actually could be. The monsters continued to fight like there was no tomorrow. The impacts of the attack sent destruction flying everywhere, turning the place into a real danger zone, and almost hit Joey and the director. But Joe quickly pushed the debris away and asked the director if she was okay. However, Director Joe had a strange expression on her face. He asked why she was staring at him like that and admitted that he felt a bit uncomfortable. She mentioned wanting a dissection later, but quickly corrected herself and said she would do a complete medical examination on him. Joe was screwed. The director was clearly more interested than he had imagined. He was at a loss for words, trying to think of something, but the director assured him that he didn't need to lie because she would keep his secret. She told him to hurry up and defeat the Goliath while she found a safe place to hide. The two monsters charged at each other with their bare hands, trying to shove each other. The fluid Goliath heard her say, "Hurry up and take me down," and became furious at being underestimated. He assured that even if the two came at him with everything, quickly switching their resistances, no attack would even scratch him. The big guy told Joe that the Goliath wouldn't break, and that seemed quite odd. Joe smirked and revealed that he didn't just have one ability. He crouched down, and several tentacles with different blades and powers began to appear. His arm transformed into a blade. He had the ability to poison, and still controlled fire and electricity from the thorn of the horned beast, along with the corrosive acid of the swamp toad's mucus. Our hero's body had so much skill that he could barely keep track, and look, the fluid Goliath was caught off guard. He couldn't understand how a human had all that power. In the midst of the chaos, the big guy decided to try to stab the dude in the head, but then, out of nowhere, fiery thorns sprouted from underneath him, as if the kid had clarity over the man. Then our protagonist charged in. He used all the blades he had, and bam! A deafening explosion went off. The fluid Goliath groaned in pain. A blinding light took over the place. It looked like a movie scene. Director Joy, sharp as ever, warned our hero to be careful while a dense smoke covered everything. They stood there waiting for the smoke to settle. When the smoke finally cleared, the director nearly ran out of breath, blood flowing, because Joy had taken a stab to her torso from the monster. The monster in turn thought he had the upper hand and said that if he killed Joy, he would still have a chance. But in a magical twist, the beast was decapitated, and our boy used his blade arms to deliver that precise cut. Joy, full of attitude, revealed that she also had the skill of a cockroach, meaning she was immortal and indestructible. Well, guess what? The monster's head rolled on the ground. What a scene. The monster started cursing, unable to accept that ending, wanting to go to hell with dignity. But Joy didn't let that slide and imposed herself over him. Director Joy, from afar, was watching everything and noticing that something was very strange about our hero but thought it was her who was tripping. Meanwhile, the big guy got into the vibe and gave a shout out to the older brother. He went to try to hug Joy, but the protagonist pushed him away. Then our hero picked up the monster's head. The system sent a tense alert. The liquid Goliath had developed a range of traits during his evolution, and if there was one thing he could absorb, it was anyone's guess. Joy, in a strategic mode, grabbed a piece of the head. He was thinking that if he could get the ability to deactivate the central magic, man, he would go insane. Without thinking twice, he swallowed the piece he grabbed. To his surprise, some parts of his body froze. What a bizarre situation. The system quickly presented a warning screen, and the alert spiked. The warning continued as the frozen parts spread, reaching his eyes and eventually covering his entire body. Imagine the panic. The next day, at the family property, Johnny Joy was at a table with Principal Joy J and Aylin. The boy was unconscious and more frozen than the Yeti. Aylin, extremely worried, asked what had happened to him. Principal Joe said his vital signs were tense, but everything was stable and that he would wake up soon. However, there was a bombshell to share. She revealed that Joe is not human, and everyone was like, "What?" She explained that he looked like us, spoke, and even thought the same, but his DNA was completely different. She believed he had adopted this appearance just to blend in among humans. Seriously? Aylin had a face like, "What the hell is going on?" Here, our boy Joe began to wake up amidst all that noise. You know, he woke up a bit lost, wondering where he was and what the hell was happening. Suddenly, God Cockroach appeared in the area and explained that when Joe absorbed the crystal core of Goliath, his body started to show signs of rejection due to the conflicting traits. He commented that it was the first time he had seen something like this, but assured him that the side effects would pass quickly. He was there, staring at him, almost as if he wanted to decipher the mysteries of the universe. Director Joe, as if giving a technical report, informed that there were traces of monsters in his system, including those of the evolved Goliath. She also mentioned that if Joe managed to negate magical cores around, he would become a huge threat to humanity. Aylin emphasized that before he fully awakened, it could be their last chance. She made it clear what she was teaching, like she wasn't going for the less dramatic side. She shot a direct question. "Where are you thinking of locking him up?" With immense nervousness, she bit her lip and waited for the answer. But then, very straightforwardly, he said that he was even more dangerous than the evolved Goliath, and that the best move would be to eliminate this threat before it was too late. Aylin and Z exchanged glances, clearly shocked by what they had just heard. G, full of emotion, practically shouted that he wouldn't let her do that, even though she was the older sister. He wasn't going to let her lay a hand on his bro. Director Joe emphasized that Joe had saved their family more than once, and that this only proved that she had called only the two of them there. The situation was quite clear. If the information leaked, Joe would be in everyone's crosshairs and, well, things would get ugly. He, resolute, decided that he wouldn't let that happen. She remembered how Joe had been fighting monsters since he arrived in Narumi City and truly believed he was on their side, wanting to be the diplomat of the situation. She agreed with her. He even added that even if his bro was a monster, he could be a good monster, you know? But that made the two ladies shout for him to be quiet, almost in unison. Joy noticed that they were in a serious mess, debating how to deal with him. Director Joe then shot out, how would they know if his little help wasn't just part of a plan? She remembered how, when they discovered a liquid Goliath, they thought he was harmless, but what was the mess? He grew and attacked their base, and the kids who took care of him, man, they all died because of that trust. And even though he was raised by humans, he dealt a blow that destroyed the second largest stronghold outside of Narumi City. She then concluded that if they let Joe live and he turned against them, there would be thousands of lives lost, all because they hesitated. As a mantra, she insisted that Joe was a monster, but despite everything, he reminded her of the time they spent together, especially in the most dangerous situations. When Joe trusted her, he even offered to go on a rescue mission, showing that he might not be so villainous after all. Challenging Director Joe, she asked what he was going to do about it, but he just lowered his gaze. Then, out of nowhere, he pressed the button and the machine with the sharp needle at the top of Joe. He started to move as if he were gearing up for hell. Director Joe kept thinking about how he had the guts to open the gate, even knowing it could go badly. He went there, all confident. She acknowledged that he had saved her life, but remembering the kid version of Goliath, who looked like a cute little child, made everything cloudy because Joe was not human, and still, the doubt lingered. Could she really trust him? The machine powered on, and his hand holding the remote control began to tremble as if it had received an electric shock. Aylin recalled the time when Joe was a superhero, helping Ju to beat Tony in the tournament, not to mention that when they were surrounded by monsters, he was the one who held the wall, and during the trouble of going to the lab, he was the one who saved Aylin. She realized that Director Joe was a bit scared that he might one day become their enemy, but without him, Aylin wouldn't even be alive to have this doubt. Furthermore, Eli got real, saying that Joe never asked for advice after making a decision, so if she truly wanted him dead, she didn't even need to say anything to the others. She challenged the other to admit that deep down, she also didn't have the guts to kill the guy. Elin begged her not to do do something so stupid. Then, looking at the remote control, she thought about the situation and suddenly tossed the thing away as if it were trash. The machine simply stopped. Joe breathed a sigh of relief as if he had finally gotten rid of a pebble in his shoe. Meanwhile, Elin exhaled the air she had been holding, like someone stepping off a moving tram. Everyone looked shell-shocked when they heard Joe thanking the crowd. He stood up and said he was grateful that everyone had trusted him. Then he asked me when he had woken up, and he answered that he had realized when the trouble started. The ice on his body began to melt, and spoiler alert, the guy was naked. He looked at Director Joe, but the hysterical one couldn't meet his eyes. He justified himself, saying that he couldn't explain everything at that moment, but begged them to believe him. Luca even promised that she would never betray the trust of each one of them. Elin remembered that nobody could know what was happening with Joe's body. And from that moment on, the four were in this mess together. Suddenly, Helen heard her phone ringing, like an emergency siren. They said something had happened, and she was called to the hospital immediately. At the hospital in the town of Narumi, the four rushed to the lobby. When they arrived, the scene was terrifying. People lying down, injured on the lobby floor. It looked like a horror movie. A badly hurt man promised his partner that he would find someone to change his bandage and told him to hold on tight. The guy complained that there was no one to take care of the wounds properly. Elin was furious seeing the Slothar squad all injured, sprawled across the lobby. She wondered, where are the paramedics? Because that just wasn't right. Someone emerged from a room shouting for a doctor, as if they had called Batman. One of the injured, who had just a scratch on his face, complained that he was still bleeding, and it hurt a lot. The nurse immediately said she would help, and asked him to lie down, but the guy was a real brute. Inside the room, the four were playing cards, completely oblivious to the chaos. Joe did the math and saw that all the paramedics were attending to the military. He questioned if they were just going to leave the injured from the Slother squad there, bleeding and dying. Then, someone shouted for Vice Captain Aylin and Director John, as if it was a divine call. Then our boy Joe, who misses nothing, quickly turned his head toward where that crazy voice was coming from. The scene got more complicated when the military guy, the very picture of law and order, grabbed the collar of one of the Slother squad members. This unfortunate soul had already lost his arms and a leg. So, dude, the situation was tense. The military man wasted no time and scolded the guy, complaining about the use of supplies, as if he owned the world. Then he even had the audacity to claim that all medical equipment belonged to the city's defense forces, and that, therefore, the control and distribution were all under his authority. Man, this made Joe so furious that it looked like he was about to explode. The veins in his neck were bulging and his irritation was sky high. I wholeheartedly thank everyone who has stuck with us so far. You are brave, but it's not over yet. Go ahead and check out the next video from GigaChad, because I want to see you all there again. And of course, if you can, support us by joining the channel members. It would really help a lot. But if that's not possible, just liking the video would be amazing. It makes a huge difference. Thank you for watching. Hey.